Suyeon Cheon stood at her desk, trying to wrap her mind around the whirlwind of news she'd just heard. A brideless wedding? Chairman Tae had set an ultimatum for his son, Mujin Tae, to marry by any means necessary. The catch. Mujin didn't even have a fiancé yet. There were only 5 months left until the wedding day, and Suyeon couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if Mujin failed to find a bride? The chairman had already booked the wedding hall, making the entire situation feel surreal. Suyeon's role as Mujin's secretary had always been demanding, but never had she imagined that finding a bride for her boss would be added to her responsibilities, especially since her feelings for Mujin had grown into something more than professional admiration over the past few years. "Suyeon, I'm counting on you," her superior had told her, leaving her with a heavy weight on her shoulders. She whispered to herself, "How am I supposed to find a bride for the man I've secretly liked for so long?" It was a ridiculous situation, one she never thought she'd be in, yet here she was. As Suyeon walked toward Mujin's office, she couldn't help but recall all the little things she'd done over the years for him. Taking barista classes just to make his favorite coffee, memorizing his schedule down to the minute, and staying late into the night to ensure everything ran smoothly. Now, she was being asked to assist in a far more personal matter. Her heart ached at the thought of Mujin marrying someone else, yet she knew she had to keep her feelings hidden. Entering Mujin's office, she tried to push aside her racing thoughts. "Sir, I've come to brief you on your morning schedule," she said, her voice steady despite her turmoil. Mujin, as usual, was calm and collected, seemingly unaffected by the wedding drama swirling around him. He nodded, his long fingers lightly tapping his desk as he listened to her report. Suyeon found herself momentarily lost in thought, staring at his elegant hands. What kind of woman would wear a ring placed by those hands? The image tugged at her heart, and she had to shake her head to snap out of it. "Ms. Cheon, your phone's ringing." Mujin's voice broke through her daydream. Startled, she fumbled to grab her phone. Embarrassed, she excused herself and rushed out of his office, scolding herself silently for her wandering thoughts. Asterisk, what on earth are you fantasizing about, Suyeon? Get a grip. Asterisk. Later, as Suyeon returned to her duties, she couldn't shake the tension building inside her. Mujin, the man she had admired for so long, was being pressured into a marriage he might not even want. And now, the chairman's expectations were placed on her shoulders too. What was she supposed to do? As if the universe wasn't chaotic enough, Mujin unexpectedly appeared in a hospital where Suyeon was visiting her ailing father. Surprised, she looked up at him, his sudden presence catching her off guard. "Sir, you didn't come here instead of going on your blind date, did you?" she asked, confused. Mujin, with his usual calm demeanor, replied firmly, "No more blind dates. I'm going on strike." Suyeon blinked, stunned by his words. "Excuse me?" she asked, unsure she had heard him right. Mujin didn't seem to need clarification. He was done with blind dates, done with being paraded around like a pawn in his father's plans. But what did that mean for the looming wedding? And for Suyeon, who was now caught in the middle of it all? Suyeon stood frozen, replaying Mujin's words in her mind. Asterisk, no more blind dates. I'm going on strike. Asterisk, her heart raced as she watched him walk away with his usual composed air. But this time, something felt different. There was a finality in his tone, an unspoken declaration that he was done playing by his father's rules. "Excuse me?" "Wait, sir." Suyeon hurried after him, her heels clacking against the marble floor. "I think you should still go on that date today. It's not too late." Mujin stopped, his gaze cool but unreadable. "It's fine," he said with a dismissive wave. "By the way, why were you looking at that Jane document?" Suyeon blinked, caught off guard. "Well, it was only because my brother seemed to be struggling with everything on his own." Mujin nodded thoughtfully. "All right then," he replied, though his attention seemed to drift elsewhere. "But if you don't go on the blind dates, what about the wedding?" He looked at her, his expression firm. "No one can force me to do anything I don't want to do. I only do what I've chosen to do." Suyeon couldn't help but think he's definitely like a boss. She admired his resolve, even though it complicated her own feelings. She had been tasked with organizing his wedding, and now it seemed like he was bent on derailing the entire thing. As Mujin walked away, Suyeon couldn't shake the conversation. His words kept replaying in her mind, and she found herself wondering, why does he seem so indifferent about the wedding? She couldn't ignore the subtle undercurrents of his frustration, maybe even sadness. Something deeper was going on with Mujin, but she didn't dare pry. Later that evening, Suyeon received a call from her brother, Sumin. He had been stressed about their father's condition and the future of Jaein. The weight of their family business seemed to rest solely on his shoulders, and Suyeon felt guilty for not being able to help more. But her life had been devoted to Taesung Group and to Mujin for so long. She wasn't sure how to balance both. Should I quit my job and come to Jaein? Suyeon asked, half joking but with a twinge of sincerity. No, Sumin said quickly. It's not that bad now. You should go back to Taesung. We can manage here. His words gave her a brief moment of relief, but Suyeon knew her responsibilities were pulling her in opposite directions. And as much as she wanted to help her family, leaving Taesung and leaving Mujin felt like an impossible choice. The next day, back at work, Suyeon felt a sense of unease. She couldn't focus, her mind drifting back to Mujin's declaration of striking from blind dates. Asterisk, what if the wedding doesn't happen? What will that mean for me? Asterisk, she wondered, trying not to think about her personal feelings toward him. As she entered Mujin's office to give him his morning briefing, she noticed his untouched cup of coffee. Normally, he'd take a sip before getting down to business, but today it just sat there, cooling. Is there a problem with the coffee, sir? She asked hesitantly. Mujin glanced at the cup, then back at her. No, it's fine. Begin the briefing, Ms. Cheon. She nodded and carried on with her usual professional tone, but something was bothering her. Mujin was distant, more so than usual, and it gnawed at her. Did I upset him? She wondered, though she couldn't imagine what she could have done. Later that night, after staying late at the office, Suyeon was preparing to head home when Mujin appeared out of nowhere. Ms. Cheon, you should call it a day, he said softly. Caught off guard, Suyeon quickly gathered her things. Oh, of course. I'm just heading out now, she replied, trying to hide her exhaustion. As she made her way toward the door, Mujin called out again. Where are you headed? Suyeon hesitated. I'm going home. Come with me. I'll drop you off. Her heart skipped a beat. No, I can just take a taxi, she replied hastily, not wanting to impose or complicate things further. Mujin raised an eyebrow, his tone slightly teasing. Do you think my car's less safe than a taxi? No, that's not what I meant. I just prefer taking a taxi, she stammered, instantly regretting her words. Asterisk, what am I saying? Now he probably thinks I feel uncomfortable around him. Asterisk. But Mujin didn't press. He simply replied, I'd prefer if you let me drop you off. At least for today. At least for today? Suyeon wondered. What does that mean? The phrase lingered in her mind, stirring emotions she had tried to keep buried. As they stepped outside, Suyeon found herself blurting out a question that had been on her mind all day. May I ask why you didn't drink your coffee, sir? Mujin glanced at her, his face calm, but his eyes betraying a flicker of emotion. Because I was upset. Suyeon's breath caught in her throat. Excuse me? Did I do something to upset you, sir? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mujin stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Ms. Cheon, are you going to leave? Suyeon's heart sank. She couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze, the weight of his question too much to bear. It was the first time he had ever asked her something so personal, and it was clear that he was upset that she was planning to leave Taesung, to leave him. In that moment, Suyeon realized something she had been avoiding for a long time. Mujin cared. He cared about her in a way that went beyond their professional relationship. And though she didn't have the words to express it, the fact that he had referred to her as my secretary was enough to stir something deep inside her. Was I okay as your secretary? Mujin's voice was softer now, more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. And then he added the one word that made her heart stop, beautiful. As Suyeon stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. Did she hear that right? Did Mujin Tae, the man she had served as a secretary for 4 long years, just propose her name as CEO? Her mind spun in a whirlwind of disbelief and confusion. Suyeon Cheon, he had said, the words ringing in her ears as if they were in slow motion. The conference room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. She felt exposed, as though every single person in the room could see the storm raging within her. Her thoughts raced. How had it come to this? Suyeon had only come here to ask for his support for her brother, Muin. She didn't even know how Mujin had ended up with 38% of Jaeon's shares. All those long nights at Taesung Group, being his right-hand woman, had that meant nothing? Now he was here, calmly suggesting that she take the reins of Jaeon, not Muin. Her heart tightened. For years, she had admired Mujin, admired his sharp mind, his unshakable confidence, the way he could command a room with just a word. He was always like a figure from mythology, powerful, untouchable. And here she was, standing in the shadow of his overwhelming presence. She had never expected anything from him, not beyond the professional respect she'd earned through hard work. But this? She could barely focus on the murmurs around her as the shareholders began to stir. Her emotions were a chaotic blend of anger, confusion, and something deeper she wasn't ready to confront. Mujin's cold pragmatism was what had brought him here, his singular focus on results. There was no room in his world for sentimentality or loyalty. It stung. How had she not seen it before? Suyeon clenched her fists under the table. This wasn't supposed to happen. Mujin, standing at the podium, continued as if everything was perfectly logical. Suyeon Cheon has been a key player in Taesung Group's executive team for the last 4 years. Her skills and knowledge, along with her direct involvement in both Jaeon and Taesung, make her the ideal candidate for the position of CEO. Suyeon's heart pounded in her chest. His words should have been flattering, but they felt like a trap. Mujin's gaze briefly met hers, and for a second, she thought she saw something deeper, something conflicted in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. No, she thought. This wasn't about her abilities or his confidence in her. It was about control. Mujin didn't trust Muin to steer Jaeon, and she was simply the next logical choice. Someone he could manipulate, someone still caught in his gravitational pull. Her brother was nowhere to be found. That realization hit her hard, and she felt a sudden pang of responsibility. She had to keep Jaeon in the family, no matter what. If that meant stepping up, then maybe, just maybe, she would do it, but not for Mujin. For her father, for her brother, for the employees who had counted on her family for years. As the whispers in the room grew louder, Suyeon stood up, her legs shaky but her resolve hardening. She had always lived in the shadows, quietly supporting others, doing the work behind the scenes. Maybe it was time for her to step into the light, even if it meant standing in direct opposition to Mujin Tae, the man she once admired, the man she might have even loved. But now, she saw him for what he truly was. Taking a deep breath, she raised her head and looked directly at Mujin. "Thank you for the recommendation, Mr. Tae," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "But I believe the shareholders will need more than just your word to trust me." The room went quiet. All eyes were on her now. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But she stood tall, finally realizing what she had to do. This wasn't just about a business proposal anymore. It was about defining her own path on her terms. Suyeon stood frozen in place as Mujin Tae's words echoed through the room. His voice was calm, commanding, and confident, but it sent a shockwave through her. He had just recommended her, Suyeon Cheon, the secretary of 4 years, as the new CEO of Jaeon. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension, a murmur of disbelief spreading like wildfire among the shareholders. But Suyeon Cheon's a woman, someone from the back stammered, the objection hanging awkwardly in the air. Mujin turned to face the man without missing a beat, his cold gaze piercing. "If you think that's a valid reason for objection, then being old must be a good enough reason for retirement." A ripple of shock went through the room. Suyeon could feel the eyes of everyone on her, some skeptical, others curious. Inside, her heart was racing. He's right. I don't have any experience managing a company. She thought, biting the inside of her lip. Being a secretary at Taesung was the only real business experience she had. What did Mujin see in her? Was this another one of his calculated moves? Mujin continued, "Ms. Suyeon Cheon has worked as my secretary for 4 years. The management skills she's experienced and learned come from me. His words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Suyeon felt her breath catch. Was he really vouching for her or subtly reminding everyone, including herself, that her success, her experience, everything she had learned, was because of him? Was she merely an extension of his own achievements? She clenched her fists under the table, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. How could she step out of his shadow? One of the shareholders challenged. So, are you saying your management abilities are insufficient, Mr. Tae? Mujin's face remained unreadable. Ms. Cheon already has a new business plan for Jaein. Does anyone here today have one as well? His voice was smooth, filled with confidence, almost daring them to argue. The silence in the room was telling. No one had a counterproposal. Of course not, Suyeon thought. She had worked day and night on that proposal, something to save Jaein from its decline. But in this moment, it wasn't about her plan. It was about him. They believe in him, not me. The answer seems to be no, Mujin declared. So we will begin the vote for the appointment of Suyeon Cheon as the new CEO. Suyeon's breath hitched. The reality of what was happening finally sank in. She was on the verge of becoming Jaein's CEO, a position she never sought, yet one that now rested on her shoulders. As the room prepared for the vote, Suyeon glanced at Mujin. Was he doing this because he believed in her? Or was it because he saw her as a pawn in his grand scheme? Sir, wait! A voice called out, but the vote was already in motion. After the meeting concluded, Suyeon walked out with an unfamiliar weight on her shoulders. Mujin approached her, his presence as commanding as ever. She looked up at him, her emotions swirling between gratitude, confusion, and something deeper. Thank you for everything today, she said, unsure if she really meant it. Was she thankful, or was she being pushed into something she wasn't ready for? Mujin gave her a small, knowing smile. No need to thank me. I put you there so you can experience for yourself how hard this job can be. Soon, you'll be missing the days when you were a secretary. His words stung, cutting through her pride. Suyeon straightened her back. I'll work hard from now on, she replied. I want to be officially acknowledged as the CEO. Mujin raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. We'll see how long that ambition lasts. As she watched him walk away, Suyeon couldn't help but feel conflicted. Was he challenging her? Testing her? Or was this his way of keeping her tied to him? She had spent years working under him, learning from him, but she could never quite figure him out. He was like a cold, distant god, omnipotent, untouchable. And yet, here she was standing in the same arena, ready to prove herself. Later that evening, Suyeon made her way to Mujin's home. She hadn't planned on coming, but something was still unresolved between them. She knocked, unsure if she was crossing a line, but knowing she needed closure. The door opened, and there he was, standing in the hallway with that same unreadable expression. What are you doing here, Ms. Cheon? Mujin asked, his tone cold. Suyeon hesitated. I came because I have something to give you. Before she could explain further, Chairman Tae walked in, casting a glance between them. It seems Ms. Cheon is very interested in your wedding, Mujin, he remarked casually. Suyeon's heart skipped a beat. The mention of the wedding sent a jolt through her. She had tried to convince the chairman to cancel it earlier, but it seemed her efforts had only complicated things. Mujin's eyes darkened. Follow me, he said, his voice low. He led her into another room, his posture stiff with frustration. What did you talk to my father about? Suyeon swallowed, her nerves on edge. I asked him if he could cancel the wedding, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Mujin's gaze hardened. Why are you worrying about that, Ms. Cheon? He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. You have nothing to do with Taesung now. Please mind your own business. Suyeon's heart ached. She had done it because she cared, but his words cut deep. I'm no longer his secretary. That reminder stung, more than she expected. But before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. Then what if I get married to you? She blurted. Her eyes widened at her own boldness, but the truth was, she couldn't bear the thought of him being humiliated on his wedding day. Mujin's eyes narrowed, unreadable as ever. Would you still tell me I have nothing to do with you? Suyeon's words hung in the air like a thunderclap. What if I marry you? She had blurted out, barely believing herself. She watched Mujin's face for any hint of emotion, but his expression remained cold and unreadable. Her heart pounded. What had she just said? Mujin's reaction was swift and sharp. "Are you out of your mind?" he snapped, his voice low but cutting. The words jolted Suyeon, but she stood her ground. Inside, she was trembling, but she wouldn't show it. Not to him. "I'm suggesting it in case you can't cancel the wedding," she explained, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Her voice was steady, but her mind raced. "What am I doing?" "You have nothing to lose," she added. It wasn't exactly a lie. She knew the position she was in, trapped between her loyalty to the company, her past as a secretary, and her new role as CEO. She had no choice but to figure things out, but it seemed that Mujin's issues were now becoming hers. Mujin raised an eyebrow, his tone icy. "Do you even have the time to be worrying about me? Work is work. This is separate," she said quickly. But she could feel the tension rising. The lines between personal and professional had blurred a long time ago. "Why am I even here?" she asked herself, but something about Mujin, his relentless pursuit of control, his unflinching will, kept her tangled in his world. "Then I suggest you go and study your company's fund flow," Mujin said, his voice sharp with annoyance. The most incompetent CEO is one who has no control over their company's finances. Suyeon's eyes narrowed. "He thinks I don't know what I'm doing," she realized, a mix of frustration and determination swelling inside her. "I already have," she shot back. "I reviewed it while looking after my dad in the hospital." Mujin stared at her, his expression still unreadable. "Can you guarantee that?" he asked. There was a challenge in his voice, one that dug into her pride. "Then tell me, what's the issue with Jane's P&L? Suyeon hesitated for a second, caught off guard by how quickly he was testing her. But then she straightened. She wasn't going to let him belittle her anymore. "You mean you already know?" she asked, her voice hardening. He smirked, a brief flicker of amusement crossing his face. "If you can't find it by tomorrow, then it proves everything you said just now was nonsense." Suyeon felt the sting of his words, her frustration boiling over. "Do I deserve this?" she thought angrily. "After offering to help with his wedding mess, he has the nerve to challenge me like this?" But instead of retaliating, she bit back her anger. Forget it. I don't care anymore. Later that day, she was sitting at a dinner meeting with Mr. Huang, one of Jane's veteran board members. He had worked closely with her father for years and now held significant influence in the company. But despite her new title, Suyeon felt like she was still just a secretary, pretending to be CEO. "Thank you for coming," Suyeon said, keeping her voice professional but respectful. She knew she didn't have Mr. Huang's full trust yet. "It's completely understandable. My father raised me like a princess, so I doubt you believe I've ever gotten my hands dirty." Mr. Huang smirked, not denying her claim. "Being a CEO means taking responsibility for even the dirtiest work around the company," he said, his tone patronizing. "This is the kind of treatment I have to get used to," Suyeon thought, hiding her irritation. "If I'm going to prove myself, I need these men to see that I'm not just playing dress-up as CEO." She swallowed her pride, pouring him another cup of rice wine as he gestured for more. It stung her to realize that, despite her position, she was still treated like the secretary she once was. Suddenly, the air in the room shifted. Suyeon looked up to see Mujin entering, his presence immediately commanding attention. Mr. Huang stiffened slightly. Mujin gave a brief, mocking smile. "I heard Jane was here, so I thought I'd come and say hello," he said, but there was no friendliness in his voice. He wasn't here to make small talk. Please, have a drink while you're here," Mr. Huang stammered, clearly unnerved by Mujin's sudden appearance. Mujin waved off the offer. "I don't share cups with people," he said flatly. Suyeon's heart raced. Mujin's appearance felt like an intrusion, but it also felt like something else, an unspoken confrontation. He glanced at her, his eyes narrowing. "Ms. Cheon, any plans to change the company's inner culture?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. She flinched but didn't show it. "I'm working on it," she said, her voice steady but tight. Inside, she was seething. He's testing me again, she thought. But why? What was he trying to prove? After Mujin left, Suyeon excused herself and followed him outside. "Mr. Tae, did you really come from a funeral?" she asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Yes," he replied without looking at her. President Juyong Park of Taesung Construction passed away. Suyeon's breath caught. "Was it an accident?" she asked, feeling a strange chill run down her spine. "A heart attack," Mujin said, his voice cold and detached. "I heard he died because I fired him." Her eyes widened. The weight of his words hung heavily between them. "It's not your fault," she said softly, but Mujin just shrugged. "Everything that happens in the company is my fault," he replied, his voice laced with a bitter edge. "The CEO is the one who takes responsibility." As Suyeon watched him walk away, she felt a strange mixture of emotions: admiration, frustration, and something else she couldn't quite place. She had always seen him as an untouchable force, but now she was starting to understand the fierce battles he must have fought to stay at the top. "This is the life of a CEO," she thought, watching him disappear into the night. "And now, I'm part of it." A desire stirred deep inside her. A desire to prove herself, to stand on her own, to finally step out of Mujin's shadow. "I'll show him," she thought. "I'll show them all." Mujin Tae stood quietly, watching Suyeon as she poured drinks, her graceful hands moving with a confidence he hadn't seen in her before. As he observed her, memories of the past flickered in his mind. There was a time when Suyeon, his faithful secretary, would never have taken his hand, never looked him directly in the eye the way she did now. Back then, there was always a distance between them, a barrier of formality, respect, and perhaps fear. "Is this the difference between a secretary and a CEO?" Mujin mused, his sharp gaze following her every movement. Secretary Suyeon Cheon would have never been this bold. He recalled the times he had watched her interact with assistant manager Jongwoo-yeon, how she would smile softly at Jongwoo's lighthearted jokes. It had sparked a strange jealousy in Mujin back then. Jongwoo had an ease with her that Mujin never had, and it had bothered him more than he was willing to admit. But now, as he stood here in the same room with her, no longer as her boss, but as a man facing another CEO, things had shifted. Suyeon had changed, and so had he. "I'm not Jongwoo-yeon," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "I'm Mujin Tae." The words lingered between them, and Suyeon looked at him, her eyes clear and unwavering. She was no longer the hesitant secretary who served drinks. Now, she was a CEO, one who would empty her own glass without hesitation. Mujin felt something stir within him, a realization he hadn't wanted to face until now. "Why did I impulsively turn the car around that day?" he thought, his mind flashing back to the moment he had made the decision to see her again, to face her as an equal. He hadn't understood it at the time, but now, standing here with her, he was beginning to see it clearly. Suyeon didn't falter as she continued their conversation. "I'll be setting up a reform business team," she said confidently, "which will include employees from a wide age range." Mujin raised an eyebrow. "A reform business? Are you sure that's going to bring in any money?" She met his skepticism with determination. "We'll know when we give it a go. It's better to try than not do anything, isn't it?" Mujin couldn't help but admire her boldness. She was no longer the woman who shrank under pressure. She was taking control, even as the veteran board members like Mr. Huang looked on with doubt. When Suyeon brought up the operating expenses being too high, Mr. Huang tried to dismiss her concerns, but she wouldn't back down. "It's normal for expenses to be incurred when running a business," Mr. Huang said defensively, but Mujin knew better. In situations like these, Mujin had learned to ask as many questions as possible, to expose the flaws and weaknesses in the arguments of those who thought they could outsmart him. He watched as Suyeon followed his lead, pressing Mr. Huang for answers, not backing down until she had made her point. She's learning fast, Mujin thought, feeling a strange mix of pride and unease. Maybe too fast. Later, as the meeting ended, Mujin approached Suyeon. "You did well," he said, his tone softer than usual. Suyeon glanced at him, a small smile playing at her lips. "The reason I did well today was because I had a grade A textbook by the name of President Mujin Tae." Mujin chuckled, a rare sound from him. But before he could respond, Suyeon handed him a business card. "Here's a card from a magazine editor," she said. I'm planning to do a media interview to let people know Jaein is still strong, and hopefully Sumin might come back. Mujin studied her for a moment. Suyeon was taking bold steps, but he could see the weight of her responsibilities bearing down on her. Yet, she pressed forward, determined to prove herself. She's serious about this, he thought. More serious than I gave her credit for. A few days later, Mujin found himself in an interview with KCS anchor Gina Yu. The studio was brightly lit, and Mujin could feel the cameras trained on him as he prepared to answer the first round of questions. Gina Yu, with her poised smile, began the interview smoothly. Taesung Group is known not only here in Korea, but also worldwide. Can you tell us about Taesung's global strategy? Mujin kept his responses short and efficient, outlining Taesung's overseas operations with practiced ease. He wasn't one for small talk, and Gina Yu seemed to realize that quickly. But something about her gaze lingered too long, her smile too knowing. As the interview went on, Mujin couldn't shake the feeling that Gina had more on her mind than business questions. He could feel the subtle shift in her demeanor. She's digging for something else, he realized. But before she could steer the conversation in another direction, Mujin's assistant stepped in, announcing that their time was up. As the interview ended, Mujin couldn't help but feel a strange tension in the air. Something was brewing, and he wasn't sure what it was just yet. The next morning, as Mujin walked into the office, he could sense the whispers among his staff. His assistant hesitated before handing him a newspaper. Mujin frowned, glancing at the headline. Taesung Group CEO embroiled in romantic scandal. Startled, Mujin's eyes widened as he scanned the article. It suggested that he and the anchor, Gina Yu, had hit it off during the interview. Ridiculous, he thought, but as he read further, he could feel his blood boil. This wasn't just idle gossip. It was a carefully crafted narrative, one that threatened to upend everything he had worked for. Mujin stormed into Suyeon's office, his expression hard. "Did you see this?" he asked, tossing the newspaper onto her desk. Suyeon, startled, glanced at the article. She stared at it, then at Mujin. "The North Pole tiger has fallen for a woman?" she muttered incredulously. "I won't believe it unless I see it with my own two eyes." Mujin clenched his jaw. This is getting out of hand, he thought. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder if this rumor, as absurd as it was, might force him to confront feelings he had long buried. Feelings he hadn't even admitted to himself. Mujin Tae sat at his desk, seething with frustration as he glared at the article in front of him. The bold headline splashed across the paper seemed unreal. Asterisk Taesung Groups, embroiled in romantic scandal. Asterisk he crumpled the edges of the page in his fists, his jaw clenched tight. This wasn't just idle gossip. It was an attack on his reputation, his carefully curated image of professionalism and control. He stood abruptly, summoning Ms. Lee, his secretary, into his office. "What's this?" he demanded, throwing the newspaper on the desk between them. Ms. Lee's eyes widened in shock as she realized what had happened. That article, it was prepared by the chairman's office. Mujin's temper flared. "So, you're telling me my secretaries just sat back and watched while the chairman's office let this ridiculous article go live?" His voice was sharp, each word laced with an anger he rarely showed. Ms. Lee flinched, but Mujin wasn't done. "Who exactly is your boss, Ms. Lee? If I ever see an article like this again, I'll make sure the secretary's office faces the consequences. Do you understand?" Ms. Lee nodded quickly, her face pale. "Yes, sir." As she hurried out of the room, Mujin sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples. How am I supposed to get myself out of this mess? He wondered. This scandal was going to complicate everything, his business dealings, his reputation, and worse, his personal life. Just as he was trying to think of a solution, his phone rang. The name on the screen gave him pause. Suyeon Cheon. Mujin felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Something more than the usual annoyance or tension he felt when dealing with other people. "Suyeon," he answered, his voice softer than before. "Hello, Ms. Lee." Suyeon greeted her former colleague on the other end. There was a pause before she continued. "I wanted to ask you something. The Anchor scandal article, is that really about Mr. Tae?" Ms. Lee sighed. "Yes, it is. Gina Yu interviewed him in his office. It all spiraled from there." "I see," Suyeon said thoughtfully, then lowered her voice. Suyeon, I need your help. I think I might end up getting sacked. There was genuine concern in Suyeon's tone now. Oh, how can I help you? Ms. Lee hesitated for a moment, then blurted out, You be the woman this week. Suyeon was taken aback. Excuse me? You no longer work here, so it shouldn't be a problem, Ms. Lee explained hurriedly. Just bump into him. It might divert attention from the scandal. Suyeon was quiet for a moment. Could I really do that? She thought. She owed Mujin for helping her at the shareholders' meeting, and she couldn't stand the thought of him being dragged into more scandal. Are you sure it's okay? She finally asked. Ms. Lee's voice sounded relieved. Yes, I'm sure Mr. Tae would be happy to see you. Suyeon bit her lip. Happy to see me? The thought unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Okay, she said. I'll give it a try. After hanging up, Suyeon couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and anticipation. She wasn't sure how things would turn out, but at least she could help Mr. Tae out of this mess. That evening, Suyeon found herself nervously waiting outside a restaurant. She had arranged to meet Mujin under the guise of discussing work, though she wasn't sure how much Mujin believed that excuse. The real goal was to distract the public from the scandal, and perhaps give Mujin something else to think about. When he arrived, Mujin was punctual as always. He spotted her immediately, a faint smile touching his lips. You're early, he said, his voice low and smooth. Suyeon felt a small flutter in her chest. She wasn't used to seeing Mujin smile, especially not at her. I was worried I'd be late, she said awkwardly. Mujin pulled out a chair for her, gesturing for her to sit. It was worth arriving early, he said, that small smile still lingering. It's on me tonight, so please enjoy. Suyeon stared at him, stunned. Why is he being so kind? She had expected cold professionalism, not this strange warmth. I can't enjoy myself if someone else is paying, she muttered, more to herself than to him. Mujin chuckled softly. You're too difficult, Suyeon. They settled into their seats, and Suyeon, still feeling flustered, tried to steer the conversation back to work. There's a work issue I wanted to discuss, she began. I'm trying to put together a team for the reform business, but there aren't enough applicants. Mujin leaned back, his sharp eyes studying her. Do you think it's because the employees don't see potential in the business? Suyeon hesitated. I'm not sure. Maybe. Mujin nodded, then said thoughtfully. You've been at Jaein for less than a month, whereas Mr. Huang has been with the company since the beginning. Who do you think the employees are more conscious of? Suyeon frowned. Mr. Huang, of course. Mujin smirked. Exactly. They're not applying because they're worried about what he might think. You need to show them that the business has potential. Give them numbers they can't argue with. That way, they have no choice but to accept it. Suyeon stared at him, her mind whirring. He's right, she realized. But how could she show them potential when she didn't even have a team yet? Before she could respond, a voice called out. Oh, Mr. Tae, it's nice to see you. Suyeon turned to see a woman approaching, someone she recognized. Mr. Tae's 9th blind date, she remembered. And you are? Mujin asked, his voice indifferent. The woman scoffed. Are you pretending you don't know me because you're on a date with another woman? Mujin's expression didn't change. It's not a blind date, he said flatly, but a real one. Suyeon's heart skipped a beat. A real date? She glanced at Mujin, searching his face for any sign of a joke, but there was none. For the first time that evening, Suyeon felt completely out of her depth. Suyeon Cheon felt a wave of panic rise in her chest as the woman standing before them raised her voice, her eyes glaring with disbelief. So please don't disturb us and just leave, Mujin Tae said coolly, his tone calm but unmistakably dismissive. Suyeon's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. He's trying to send her away, she thought, her heart racing. The woman's face twisted in shock. You pretend you don't know me and... what? Disturb you? Her voice grew louder, almost shrill. I can't believe this. Mujin remained unfazed, his expression unreadable. The woman, clearly furious, scoffed. Which family are you from? She demanded, turning her attention to Suyeon. Seeing that you're dating a man of this caliber, are you some top TV celebrity? But it's weird. I've never seen you before. Suyeon froze, her mind racing. What do I say? She wasn't a celebrity, but admitting she was the CEO of Jaein felt like giving the woman ammunition. And besides, it wasn't like she and Mujin were actually in a relationship. They were barely even close. Should I just say, I'm Suyeon Cheon? Before she could speak, Mujin cut in, his voice sharp. Whatever she is, she's better than you, he said, his tone icy. And it looks like you've got a lot of free time on your hands. Don't you have another blind date to go to? The woman's face reddened with humiliation, and after a tense moment, she turned on her heel and stormed off. Suyeon let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Are you sure it's okay to just let her leave like that? Suyeon asked hesitantly, unsure of what had just unfolded. Don't worry, Mujin replied, his voice smooth and detached. I've got nothing to do with her. Suyeon nodded, but a strange feeling settled in her chest. Nothing to do with her, he had said. Mujin was always cold, dismissive to people he had no connection with. But then, what did that make her? She wasn't his real date either. She was just helping him, right? It wasn't like there was anything more between them. Still, she couldn't shake the odd mixture of disappointment and relief as she glanced at Mujin. It's an honor to have dinner with you like this, she said quietly, trying to be content with the relationship they had. This is enough, she told herself, even though it didn't quite feel that way. Mujin picked up his wine glass, swirling it lightly before taking a sip. Do you like to drink? He asked casually. The wine has a nice aroma. You definitely have good taste. Suyeon smiled awkwardly. I'm not sure if I'd call it good taste. I just like it. Mujin's eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite place as he set the glass down. I'm telling you to stop drinking, he said bluntly. Take care of yourself afterward. Suyeon blinked, a bit taken aback by his sudden change in tone. Before she could respond, Mujin asked, Have you heard anything about Sumin? No, not yet, she replied, a little startled by the shift in conversation. But I think I might hear from him soon, once the interview gets released. Mujin raised an eyebrow. You had an interview? Suyeon nodded. Yes, with the reporter from Elle magazine. The same one who interviewed you. There was a brief pause before she added, almost shyly. Would you like me to send you a copy when it's published? I'm not tooting my own horn or anything, but if you're interested. Mujin's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Make sure to send me a copy. Suyeon felt her cheeks warm at his words. But then, a sudden question popped into her head. She hesitated for a moment before asking, Mr. Tae, how would you feel if a scandal article about us went out? Mujin didn't miss a beat. Don't worry, he said firmly. That will never happen. Why not? Suyeon asked, genuinely curious. I'll make sure it doesn't, Mujin replied confidently, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Suyeon couldn't help but feel a pang of something she couldn't quite name. So a newscaster is okay, but not me, she thought, but before she could stop herself, she blurted out, What are you saying? Are you drunk? Mujin glanced at her, his expression softening for the first time that night. You saved me, he said quietly, his voice almost tender. I'll protect you as well, so just use me. Suyeon's heart skipped a beat at his words, but she quickly tried to steady herself. I'll have to call a driver, she muttered, looking away. I wonder if there's one nearby. Mujin looked up at the sky, his face unreadable. There aren't any stars tonight, he said, his voice almost wistful. Isn't that strange? Have you ever seen tons of stars in the sky? Suyeon asked, unsure where the conversation was going. No, Mujin replied, but I don't think I'd be particularly impressed. Suyeon stared at him, confused. What are you talking about? Mujin stood up suddenly. Then let me show you. Wait, where are we going? Suyeon asked, startled, as Mujin began walking toward the exit. Gaepyeong, he said simply. Suyeon's eyes widened in disbelief. Gaepyeong? On foot. Mujin smirked. You get a really pretty view of the stars there. You wouldn't know since you've only lived in the city. Suyeon shook her head, exasperated. Just trust me and come along, Mujin said, his tone almost teasing. No, Suyeon retorted, finally catching up to him. We can't go to Gaepyeong. It's a workday tomorrow. Mujin stopped, turning to face her. It's an hour and a half by car. That's a minimum of 3 hours round trip, she added, her voice firm. Not to mention, it's late now. Mujin let out a small sigh, seemingly resigned. Fine, he muttered. Let's just go home then. We can go to Gaepyeong next time. That is, if there's a reason to. As they walked back in silence, Suyeon's mind wandered back 9 years, to a wine bar in Cheongdam-do. She had been so young then, so unsure of herself. She remembered the night vividly, the first time she had ever laid eyes on Mujin Tae. Suyeon Cheon, her friend had called out, snapping her out of her daze. What? Did you call me? Suyeon had asked, startled. You were looking at him, weren't you? Mujin Tae, the only son of the chairman of Taesung Group. Suyeon had blushed, embarrassed. No, I wasn't, but it had been a lie. Everyone in the bar had been staring at him, though no one admitted it. Suyeon sighed, shaking herself out of the memory. She glanced at Mujin, walking silently beside her. How strange, she thought. This isn't how it felt back then. Suyeon's heart raced as she hurried up the dimly lit path, her footsteps quick and uncertain. She could hear the heavy breathing behind her, the sound of someone following her much too closely. Please, someone, be here. Panic seized her chest as she glanced over her shoulder, desperate for any sign of safety. As she rounded the corner, her voice broke. Excuse me, can you please She froze. Standing before her, calm and indifferent, was the last person she expected to see. Huh? The guy from before? She whispered, recognizing Mujin Tae, his cold eyes meeting hers without the slightest hint of surprise. This place is off limits, he said, his voice low and authoritative. Go back down. Suyeon stumbled, her words tumbling out in a rush. But there's a guy following me, and I'm not lying. It's the truth. Mujin's gaze softened slightly as he stepped forward, but before he could respond, another voice interrupted them. Ha! You and your extravagant lifestyle. A man's voice sneered from behind. Suyeon turned to see a figure approaching them, his stance aggressive and mocking. Did you see the girl who came up here? The man asked Mujin, his tone laced with irritation. Mujin's lips curled into a smirk. I didn't see any girl, he said coolly, glancing sideways at Suyeon. But I did see a kid. Are you chasing after little girls now? The man's face twisted in anger. Shut up. You think I'm scared of you? He squared his shoulders, fists clenched. I can take you out with a single punch. Don't go strutting around just because you're a Taesung boy. Mujin's expression didn't change, his voice a dangerous calm. Then go ahead. The man hesitated for a moment, but instead of throwing a punch, he spat on the ground, muttering under his breath before stalking away. You're so full of yourself, he grumbled, his bravado quickly fading. Go home. Don't hang around in places like this. As the man disappeared into the night, Suyeon let out a shaky breath. Yes, she whispered, barely believing her luck. Mujin had saved her, even though it seemed so effortless for him. Where's her room? Mujin asked quietly, turning to one of the staff nearby. Without a word, they motioned for him to follow, leading them through the quiet corridors. Suyeon walked in silence, her mind still racing. Asterisk, how did this happen? How did I end up here? Asterisk, she had only wanted a quiet evening, but now it felt like her life was spiraling in a direction she couldn't control. When they finally reached her room, she sighed with exhaustion. Mujin glanced at her as she lay down, his eyes softening for just a moment. It looks like Suyeon's inconvenienced you, he said quietly to the staff, his voice surprisingly gentle. It's okay, the staff member replied, bowing slightly. It wasn't an inconvenience. Mujin turned his gaze back to Suyeon, who was already drifting off into an exhausted sleep. He couldn't help but chuckle softly as he noticed her sleeping habits. She had curled up like a child, clutching onto his jacket like it was a lifeline. Oh my gosh, he muttered to himself. Her sleeping habits. As he quietly left the room, his mind wandered back to the conversation he had with his family earlier. His mother's voice echoed in his ears, sharp and biting. So, did you decide on Suyeon Cheon? She had asked, her tone laced with disapproval. If I see another scandal article, I'm going to leave this house, Mujin had said firmly, standing his ground. His mother, unfazed, had sneered in return. Then make sure to sign a renunciation of inheritance before you leave. She had shot back, her words cutting deep. So you can distribute your wealth to your siblings. Wealth, Mujin had thought bitterly. That's all they ever talked about. That's all his mother seemed to care about. His reputation, the family name, their status. He clenched his jaw as the memory resurfaced. Why you? You come home late, and that's all you have to say to me? He remembered her final words before he had stormed out. If I see a single article with her name in it, there will be consequences. Mujin had dismissed her warnings at the time, but now, as he walked through the empty halls, he couldn't help but feel conflicted. His reaction to Suyeon was different compared to his past encounters, especially with the newscaster his family had once approved of. But this was different. Was it the scandal that bothered him? Or was it the fact that it involved Suyeon Cheon specifically? Is there really something going on between us? Mujin's thoughts were jumbled, his normally calm demeanor slipping as he pressed his hand against his temple. He still hadn't heard from Suyeon. She hadn't contacted him since the night she'd fallen asleep clutching his jacket. There's no way she woke up and didn't notice, he thought, frustrated. Didn't she see my jacket? Was she saying it didn't mean anything? That it was just another moment in passing? Mujin hated the uncertainty gnawing at him. This really isn't my style, he thought. He was a man of control, of precision. He didn't let emotions sway him. But Suyeon had a way of slipping past his defenses without even trying. I'll just ask her directly, he muttered to himself, his jaw set with determination. Mujin sat back in his chair, his brows furrowed in thought. This wasn't his style, waiting around, overthinking things. Usually, he was decisive, always in control. But this time it was different. The jacket. Suyeon hadn't mentioned it at all, and it was driving him crazy. This really isn't my style, he thought, standing abruptly. I'll just ask her directly. As he reached for his phone, it buzzed in his hand, and a message popped up. Asterisk, it's at your place. Try looking for it. Asterisk. Mujin blinked in surprise. She found it? He hadn't expected her to look for it. His mind raced with possibilities. Did she mean to leave it behind? Was she trying to avoid him? He imagined the jacket sitting at her place, discarded like it was nothing. She didn't know what it meant to him. To her, it might just be another piece of clothing. He paced the room, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. What do I do? He thought about all the clothes he owned. She probably thinks I'd just throw it away, like it didn't matter. Mujin clenched his fists, the indecision gnawing at him. Should I tell her I found it now? But then he paused, realization dawning on him. I shouldn't be at home at this time of day. If he admitted he was there, it would only prove that he had been waiting, obsessing. He couldn't afford to look desperate. As his mind spiraled, a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Miss Cheon, are you busy? A voice called out, pulling Suyeon from her own whirlwind of anxiety. Suyeon turned, startled. No. What is it? It's about the bag reform business, the colleague said, watching her closely. Suyeon snapped back to the present. Oh, that? Let's go. She hurriedly followed, grateful for the distraction, even though her thoughts still lingered on the jacket. I had no idea he'd look for it. What if he already found it and thinks I'm avoiding him? The thought made her stomach twist in knots. In the office, Suyeon's mind remained distracted even as her colleague talked. I think we first need to show our employees the potential the reform business has, the colleague explained, flipping through documents. Please have Jin O of design team to handle the promo page. Suyeon nodded absent-mindedly, her attention drifting until another voice broke through the haze. Suyeon, over here. She blinked, spotting an old friend waving her over. Thank goodness, she thought, smiling despite the turmoil inside. Where's everyone else? She asked as she approached. I didn't tell the others. Her friend grinned mischievously. Suyeon raised an eyebrow, confused. What? It would have been the perfect chance to see everyone. I didn't even get a leaving party, you know? Her friend chuckled. I swear, you sometimes don't know how to read the room. It's nice like this, just the two of us. Suyeon forced a smile. Yeah, I'm sure it is. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Mujin. Asterisk, why does he care about the jacket? Does it mean something? Asterisk. Her friend, oblivious to Suyeon's internal conflict, kept talking. Isn't it hard being a CEO now? It's not that bad, Suyeon replied, brushing her hair aside. I have my grade A textbook. Textbook? Her friend asked, confused. Suyeon laughed awkwardly. When I think, what would Mr. Tae do in this situation? I get the answer right away. Her friend rolled their eyes. Look at you still talking about Mr. Tae even after moving over to Jaen. I'm telling you, he's helpful, Suyeon insisted, though a part of her felt uneasy. Does he even care? She sighed, the weight of it all sinking in. Do you know he calls me Ness Cheon sometimes? She said, her voice dropping. Really? Her friend asked, intrigued. Yes, and when our eyes meet, he gives me this really scary look. It gives me chills, Suyeon confessed, shivering slightly at the memory. Her friend laughed. Maybe he's not in a good mood these days. Suyeon nodded, her thoughts spinning. Has he forgotten about me too? Meanwhile, Mujin couldn't shake the thought of Suyeon. He'd heard the rumors, the scandal with the newscaster. It hadn't bothered him at the time, but now it felt different. Why hasn't she contacted me? Later that evening, Suyeon was in the car, her mind still tangled in thoughts of Mujin when her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID, her heart skipping a beat. Mr. Tae? Yes, hello? She answered, her voice trembling slightly. Did you find my jacket? Mujin's voice was cool, but there was an edge to it. Suyeon froze, her mind scrambling for an answer. Excuse me? Oh. Mujin sighed, the tension clear. I didn't hear from you, so I thought I'd call first. You really must be busy now that you're a CEO. Suyeon felt her pulse quicken. Oh, I just never got around to it. Sorry. Her hands tightened around her phone. This is bad, really bad. Did you want me to send it to you now? She asked, her voice shaky. No need, Mujin replied, his tone distant. It's possible. It's just that I dropped it off at the dry cleaners. The silence on the line was deafening before Mujin spoke again. All right. As the call ended, Suyeon felt her heart sink. She hadn't expected the conversation to go like this. She hadn't planned for the lie to spiral out of control. What do I do now? In a rush, she stood up, brushing off her friend's protests. Mr. Yun, something urgent's come up. I'm afraid I have to go. She dashed out the door, her heart pounding. Mujin was still in her head, and now, more than ever, she knew she had to face him. But what would she say when she did? The dry cleaners. Right, she thought, racing down the street. She hadn't planned on this, but maybe it was time to stop running. Suyeon barely had time to catch her breath before she found herself rushing out the door again, her thoughts a mess. Where are you going? A colleague asked as she bolted past them. The dry cleaners, she called back, not stopping to explain further. I can't believe this is happening, she thought to herself, frustration bubbling inside. I never should have let it go this far. As she hurried, her mind kept replaying the words Mujin had spoken earlier. Mr. Tae, I'm terribly sorry for not taking better care of your jacket. The way he had said it, so formal, distant, was like a punch to her gut. Why does he care so much about this jacket? She wondered. Was it just a simple request, or was there something deeper? She couldn't shake the feeling that she had missed something important. Then there was the jealousy. She could feel it in the way he spoke. Miss Cheon must have sent you a gift, he had said, his tone clipped. I had to force her to give it to me. And when he mentioned Jongwoo, Suyeon could sense the tension. She smiles at Jongwoo and even has drinks with him. But with me, all she does is say sorry. The words echoed in her head as she walked, and she couldn't help but feel guilty. Had she really been treating Mujin that differently? Back at the office, Mujin was also wrestling with his own thoughts. He hadn't even gotten around to meeting the new employee today. Mr. Tae, we have a new employee. May I introduce? His assistant had started, but Mujin waved them off. Later, he had replied coldly. His mood was terrible, and everyone around him could feel it. The air felt tense, thick with unspoken frustration. Why am I like this today? He wondered. Is it Suyeon? The thought of her not getting back to him was driving him mad. She hadn't contacted him about the jacket, and now it was all he could think about. The situation was spiraling out of control in his mind, and it was starting to affect everything else. A new hire approached him nervously, clearly unsure whether to introduce themselves now or wait for a better moment. Should I introduce myself now? They whispered to a colleague. No, I think he's busy right now. Let's save it for later, the colleague advised, ushering them away quickly. It's not a good day for Mr. Tae, they thought, observing the storm cloud hovering over his head. Later, Suyeon found herself with Jin, discussing the promotional campaign they were working on. She was trying to focus, but her mind kept drifting back to Mujin. Jin, however, seemed unaware of her distraction and continued explaining the design concepts for their upcoming project. "It's not that you need to do better," Suyeon said, trying to offer encouragement. "It's just that I'm a perfectionist." Jin smiled nervously. "You have great design skills, Jin. There's a warmth to it, and it even has character." Suyeon continued, hoping her words would provide some reassurance. At least someone deserves kindness today, she thought bitterly. She wished she could find a way to bridge the growing distance between herself and Mujin, but everything felt more complicated than ever. As the day went on, Suyeon's anxiety grew. He must have gotten the jacket by now, she thought, chewing her lip as she glanced at the time. So, that's it? But she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still unresolved. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a new message. "Do you remember what you said to me in the elevator on the last day we worked late?" Suyeon's heart skipped a beat as she read the text. "Do you remember what you said to me in the elevator on the last day we worked together?" She stared at her phone, her mind racing. Asterisk, what did I say? What does he mean? Asterisk, panic rose in her chest as she frantically tried to recall the moment. "I don't believe I have," she replied, her fingers trembling as she typed. Such a disappointment, came his swift response. "A promise is a promise. What on earth is he talking about?" Suyeon muttered to herself, pacing the room. She had already sent him the jacket, so what else could he want? Her mind raced through all their past conversations, trying to pinpoint what she might have forgotten. Is it the magazine? That evening, just as Suyeon was about to leave the office, she saw Mujin walking out. "He's leaving now?" she thought, surprised. "Have a nice evening, sir," she called out, watching him go. Mujin glanced back briefly, his expression unreadable. "I'll be driving today, so you can go home," he said to his driver, dismissing him. "I feel like it has to be today," Suyeon thought, suddenly resolute. "I have to get him that magazine." She raced to the store, grabbing the issue Mujin had been waiting for. As she paid for it, her phone rang again. "Hello? Mr. Tae? Are you outside?" Suyeon asked as she answered. "I brought the magazine for you, but they said you left early. Are you available now?" To her surprise, Mujin responded quickly. "Mr. Tae, over here," she called, spotting him nearby. "That was pretty quick," Mujin said, his tone casual as if the day hadn't been filled with tension. "Yes, well, I was nearby," Suyeon replied, handing over the magazine. Mujin barely looked at it. "You wanted this, didn't you?" Suyeon asked, her voice a little uncertain. "Thank you," he said, taking the magazine without even pretending to read it. Maybe I overreacted, Suyeon thought, feeling a bit silly for rushing over. "Was it really that urgent? You came all the way here to give me this, right?" Mujin asked suddenly, his gaze softening. "I'd like to pay you back. Is there anything you want?" Suyeon blinked in surprise. "Well, I don't really need anything." But Mujin wasn't satisfied with her answer. "Come on, there must be something," he pressed. Hesitating for a moment, Suyeon finally spoke. "Can I call you when I have something to ask?" Mujin raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that what you've been doing so far?" he asked, his tone light but curious. "Well," Suyeon stumbled over her words, feeling flustered. "Until now, I've been calling you after much deliberation because I wasn't sure if I could or not. But if you give me permission, then maybe I could call you feeling a lot less anxious." Mujin paused, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Is that a no?" Suyeon asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mujin looked at her, his expression softening even more. "No," he said quietly. "It's not a no." Suyeon's heart raced as she stood before Mujin, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "I think I'd be able to call you from now on feeling a lot less anxious," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then, after a beat, she added, "Is that a no?" Mujin tilted his head, his gaze steady and unreadable. He looked at her for a moment before asking softly, "Ms. Cheon, do you find me unapproachable?" Suyeon's eyes widened, caught off guard by his question. "Yes, very unapproachable." The words nearly escaped her lips, but she stopped herself just in time. "No, not at all," she managed instead, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "It's because I respect you." For a moment, there was silence between them. Mujin's expression softened slightly, though his features remained calm and composed. He leaned back in his chair, reflecting on Suyeon's words. Respect, that had always been the invisible line drawn between them. It was the barrier that made him the sun and her the moon, always circling but never colliding. If President Tae is the sun, then I was the moon, she had once thought to herself, comparing their dynamic. Asterisk, the two will never run into each other. Asterisk now, sitting across from him, Suyeon couldn't help but acknowledge the distance between them. No matter how close they were physically, it always felt like there was something vast between them, something that kept her tethered to the role of admiration from afar. Even as she looked at him now, she realized the distance was real, and it wasn't just one-sided. He's always been out of reach, she thought. Yet, hearing him say she could call him made her feel like maybe, just maybe, the distance wasn't as unbridgeable as she had always believed. You can call me, Mujin said finally, his voice carrying an unfamiliar gentleness. Thank you, Suyeon breathed out, the weight lifting off her shoulders. I won't be calling you for trivial things, I promise. She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. So, could I call you for something like this? For example, her voice trailed off as she tried to think of a scenario that wasn't too imposing. Mujin only smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth twitching upward ever so slightly, but he didn't reply. Their conversation shifted to the Jaein project, a shared passion of theirs. Suyeon's eyes lit up as she spoke about it, feeling more at ease now that the tension had somewhat dissipated. Jaein really has a long history, she remarked. There are all sorts of stories. One customer said her grandfather still uses the first bag we ever made. She said it's still fine and sturdy. Mujin's eyes flickered with something Suyeon couldn't quite place. Was it pride? Sadness? Maybe a little of both. He reached out, clasping the table lightly as if grounding himself to the moment. It would be great if you woke up and read the stories, Suyeon said softly, her voice filled with warmth. Just then, a sudden shift in the room's atmosphere pulled her back to reality. An article popped up on her phone, something about Mujin. What the? She scanned the headline quickly, her heart dropping. Asterisk, President Tae's been making romantic phone calls with another woman every day. Asterisk, Suyeon froze, her mind racing. That's simply not possible. She thought frantically, her emotions in turmoil. Asterisk, even I haven't been able to do that with him. Yet, asterisk, she added to herself with a sting of frustration and envy. Later that evening, Mujin returned home, still unaware of the storm brewing around him. The house felt cold and empty, as it always did when he arrived. His mind was on Suyeon's words, her respect, her nerves, her hidden emotions. He knew there was something she wasn't saying, but he didn't press her. It wasn't his way. Get some rest, he had told her as they parted, but the words felt hollow to him. His mind kept replaying the day's events, her eyes, her hesitation. Does she see the same distance between us that I do? He wondered. But before he could dwell on it, his phone buzzed with a call from home. It was his family, yet it wasn't a warm welcome. The tension in his household had been building for days. His father had warned him about another scandal, the consequences that would follow if one more article appeared. Now, this new rumor about him and Suyeon was spreading like wildfire, and he could feel the weight of it already pressing down on him. I can't believe this is happening again, Mujin thought bitterly, gripping the phone tighter as he spoke with his father. I told you, if there's another scandal, there will be consequences, his father had warned. But this one, Mujin sighed, rubbing his temple. This one is for real. Meanwhile, Suyeon sat in her own apartment, the article weighing heavily on her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had somehow been dragged into something bigger than she realized. He's been making romantic calls? She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. With who? She thought, rolling her eyes at the ridiculousness of it all. But the pit in her stomach didn't go away. The thought of Mujin being involved with someone else, even if it wasn't true, stirred emotions she hadn't expected. What am I even feeling? She asked herself, though the answer was too clear for her to admit. Just as she tried to push the thoughts aside, her phone buzzed again. It was Mujin. He's calling? Hello, she answered, her voice quiet but steady. I'm home, Mujin said, his voice coming through the receiver. The warmth she had heard earlier in his office was gone, replaced by something more serious, more thoughtful. Go on, he urged her. Suyeon blinked, momentarily thrown off by his sudden shift. We have tons of customer stories submitted for the reform event, she began, not sure where this conversation was heading. I just wanted to tell you that. Then you'll have your team set up soon, he replied, his voice softening once more. Yes, I think so. Thank you, Mujin said. But there was something in his tone that made Suyeon pause. He sounded distant, like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, but still holding it together for her sake. Without you, CEO Suyeon Cheon would have never existed, he added quietly. It would have been a lot harder for me without you. Suyeon's heart skipped a beat. If I tell him how I feel in this situation, she thought, I wonder how he'll respond. Suyeon's heart fluttered nervously as she stood on the brink of confession, the words dancing on the tip of her tongue. If I tell him how I feel in this situation, I wonder how he'll respond. But before she could voice her thoughts, her phone buzzed ominously, pulling her attention away. Mr. Tae, there's something I need to tell you, she started, but her words were cut short by the frantic voice of Mujin's father echoing through the receiver. Mujin Tae, the old man shouted, his frustration palpable even from a distance. You ungrateful son. Oh no, Suyeon thought, her stomach dropping. Not now. Ms. Cheon, I'm sorry, Mujin muttered, his voice trailing off as he quickly muted the call. We'll have to speak later. Suyeon's mind was racing. What is it, father? Mujin's tone shifted as he reluctantly engaged with his father, whose indignation was evident. Do you think 5 billion won is small potatoes? Are you saying the donation was a waste of money? She thought, incredulous at the sheer audacity of the question. A mixture of sympathy and exasperation washed over her. How could they be so callous? She mused. That money was meant to help people. As Mujin's father continued to berate him, Suyeon felt a tightening in her chest. I swear I'm going to pass out because of him. Mujin, if you don't wish to lose any more money, don't do anything else until the wedding, the elder Tae commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Suyeon's heart sank further. She couldn't help but feel for Mujin. The weight of familial expectations was a burden he bore so silently, yet it clearly gnawed at him. Tell manager Yoon in the secretary's office, his father added, that from now on, she'll be handling the matter independently without the help of the president's office. The call ended abruptly, leaving Mujin silent and visibly shaken. How could he hang up on me now? Suyeon wondered, feeling the remnants of her confession slip away like smoke. Don't tell me he sensed that I was going to tell him I like him, and stop me from doing so in advance. Frustration coursed through her veins. I won't tell him how I feel, she resolved. From now on, it's only business between us. Determined to shift her focus back to work, Suyeon steeled herself. We already have a lot of customers who've requested their bag be reformed, she announced to her team. I think most of them probably stashed their old bag away and then took it out this time. The crucial point here is for these customers to feel that their reformed bag is a brand new bag. I'd like the design team to really put in your 200% on this. Yes, ma'am, her team chorused, enthusiasm returning as they rallied around the task. While the excitement in the room buzzed around her, Suyeon felt a pang of longing. She had hoped for a flood of applications for the reform team, but reality fell short of her expectations. At least we have a skilled veteran designer who joined as the team lead, she thought, relieved that the project was gaining traction, even if slowly. I'll probably get swayed again when I see his message, she mused to herself, a smile creeping onto her face before she shook it off. Asterisk no. From now on, I'm going to focus only on Jaein. Asterisk. Yet, as she moved through her day, doubt crept in. Mujin hadn't replied to her last text, and her heart raced at the thought of what that might mean. Could something be up? She wondered anxiously, glancing at her phone as if it might light up with his name at any moment. But it's too late to call her now. Meanwhile, Mujin was sitting in his office, a whirlwind of thoughts consuming him. Sir, perhaps you'd like to leave soon, his assistant suggested, sensing his restlessness. No, he replied decisively. Take me to Ms. Suyeon Cheon's home. I'll be able to sleep in peace only after I see that she's home. His assistant raised an eyebrow, surprised. He's that concerned about her? As they drove through the quiet streets, Mujin couldn't shake the sense of urgency that gnawed at him. Asterisk, I'll just check and go home. Only check. Asterisk. Sir, I think it's Ms. Cheon over there, his assistant pointed out, and Mujin's gaze followed. Suyeon stood just a few blocks away, engaged in a lively conversation, her laughter ringing through the air. That tiger's a tough one, Mujin thought, a smirk appearing on his lips. She's really something. With that, he stepped out of the car, the crisp evening air invigorating him. What am I doing? He thought, feeling the familiar flutter of anxiety in his stomach. What do I even say? As he approached her, she turned, surprise flickering in her eyes. What are you doing here, Mr. Tae? She asked, her voice a mixture of shock and curiosity. I coincidentally saw you all passing through, he replied, his attempt at nonchalance failing miserably. Asterisk, well, it isn't a lie. Coincidentally? He's in my neighborhood? Asterisk. Really? Then do you think I came here to meet you, Ms. Cheon? He asked playfully, trying to lighten the mood, but Suyeon's flush told him he had struck a nerve. No, I didn't think you did, she stammered, a hint of disappointment lacing her voice. What was I expecting? She chided herself internally, but he could see her disappointment mirrored in her expression. Why are you playing this? Mujin pressed. I was bored. You know, when you sometimes want to play stuff like this. He gestured vaguely, feeling the awkwardness settle around them. Then why didn't you reply to my text? Suyeon shot back, her voice rising in frustration. Then get a doll for me, please, she added, shifting the topic as she tried to maintain her composure. A doll? Mujin blinked, taken aback. I didn't know you liked them. Please wait. I'll pick one as soon as I can, he promised, determined to keep the conversation light. You really are bad at this, she teased, though there was a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. It's not that I'm bad at this. It's harder than it looks. Mujin protested, but the playful banter felt like a balm, easing the tension between them. Then why don't you try with the last bill I have? She suggested, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I hope he fails so I don't feel bad about it. Mujin laughed, the sound bright and genuine. How did you do it? Don't you just aim at it and then claw it up? He asked, incredulous. But it doesn't work that easily, she replied, exasperated but laughing nonetheless. You're a genius, Mr. Tae, she exclaimed, shaking her head in disbelief. I tried 10 times yesterday and still couldn't. The moment stretched between them, filled with laughter and something unspoken. As Mujin watched Suyeon's eyes light up, he felt the distance between them begin to fade, even if just for a moment. Maybe this is how it begins, he thought, his heart racing at the possibility. Maybe there's a chance for more than just business. Suyeon couldn't help but beam as she looked at the toy tiger in her hands. You're a genius, Mr. Tae, she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with excitement. I tried 10 times yesterday and still couldn't get one. A mix of disbelief and joy swirled inside her, the warmth of their shared laughter echoing in her mind. Oh gosh, she thought suddenly, noticing how close he was. Mujin's face was mere inches from hers, and she could feel her cheeks warm. Could he be? The thought danced teasingly at the edges of her mind, but she shook it off. They were just friends, right? Let's go. I'll take you home, Mujin said, his voice steady, though Suyeon noticed a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. Are you not coming? She asked, surprised. I am. He hesitated, glancing at the toy. Can I really have this? Yes. I'm not too fond of tigers, he replied, and Suyeon's heart skipped a beat at his easy smile. But didn't you ask me to get it for you? She thought, torn between gratitude and confusion. Well, it seems you want it more than I do, so you can have it. She couldn't deny that she had really wanted it, but seeing Mujin so pleased filled her with warmth. Well, thank you, she said softly, her heart fluttering. Good night. Shall we go, sir? His assistant prompted, but Mujin held up a hand, his mind elsewhere. As he stood there, watching Suyeon, a sudden realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. I have a terrible crush on her. Maybe it had started a long time ago, but now it was undeniable. He felt like the moon, constantly in her orbit, while she radiated like the sun, bright and overwhelming. Ms. Cheon, his assistant interjected, breaking his reverie. Shenyang Department Store has confirmed they will be increasing the sales commission when renewing our contract. They said the reason is because Jain department store's revenue has fallen. Mujin rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility. Our revenue has fallen? The frustration churned within him, the tyranny of large-scale distributors tightening its grip. The revelation hit hard. The tyranny of large-scale distributors that I'd never experienced when working at Taesung is giving me a headache, he admitted, sighing heavily. Department stores are a distribution channel I can't afford to lose. They held more than 70% of the market share, a crucial point for any business. As Mujin pondered the implications, Suyeon's voice lingered in his mind. We're making attempts to transcend generations via the reform business. Finding a publicity model with more potential to reach different generations might be a good way to boost our revenue again. The idea started to form, but how? How about we try top celebrity endorsements, he suggested, igniting a spark of hope. Most top celebrities prefer luxury brands. Our bags are mostly loved by working professionals. Then I'll look into drama product placements. Dramas? Suyeon echoed, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Ah! A friend from university works at a broadcasting station. Let me give him a call. Mujin felt a wave of determination surge through him. This could be the breakthrough they needed. The following day found Suyeon in a bustling cafe, waiting for Mujin's friend. Hello? It's me, Suyeon, she said into her phone, trying to suppress the anxiety gnawing at her stomach. I'm at the cafe right now. Huh? You're still waiting? Came the reply, laced with disbelief. Still waiting? Suyeon frowned. Some problems have come up with the shoot I'm doing right now, so I'm running late. Do you want to wait some more? Or leave? I'll wait a bit longer, sure, okay. As she sat there, a mix of anticipation and doubt swirled in her mind. Was this really the best choice? Her thoughts drifted to the latest gossip surrounding Taesung. Hey, did you hear about the president of Taesung? A nearby table buzzed. He's suing newscaster Gina Yu for defamation. Suyeon's ears perked up. No way. So then it was really a fake scandal? It seems Gina Yu begged him to withdraw the lawsuit. It's a case of her becoming Cinderella overnight, then being discarded once the clock hit midnight. As the chatter continued, Suyeon couldn't help but wonder how Mujin would have handled such a situation. I doubt he's ever been mistreated, but for certain he wouldn't have just left without putting up a fight. Ms. Lee, she called out, her mind racing. You told me last time that your younger brother works as a society reporter at a broadcasting station. I need to enter KCS Broadcasting right now. Do you think you'd be able to help me? Are you serious? You know that's impossible, Ms. Lee replied, disbelief etched on her face. Tell the writer to change the story, Suyeon insisted, her frustration mounting. This sounds like Ms. Lee's voice trailed off. Do you think it makes sense to be agonizing over what to do between revenge and love in a massage chair? I get that you need product placement, but this is ridiculous. Suyeon felt her patience waning. Anyway, I just can't get in the zone like this. As the conversation drifted away, Suyeon's thoughts remained focused on Mujin and the project. I should have said something more. Just then, the door creaked open, and a familiar face stepped inside. Mr. Seo, Suyeon exclaimed, surprise bubbling up within her. How did you get in? No one's allowed in here, he replied, his brow furrowed. I wanted to see you at the cafe, if possible, but I was feeling too tired to wait for more than a couple of hours without any notice. I really wanted to go, but our actor refuses to shoot. His voice was laced with frustration. She pulled out her business card. I contacted you regarding work, so I hope you can spare some time when I contact you again next time. Wait, as a producer and not my university friend, he paused, and she could see a flicker of concern in his eyes. I'm sorry if it's none of my business, but I think it would be good for you to rethink exactly what it is you need to do as an actor. Turning away, he added, I look forward to seeing you on the screen. As he walked away, Suyeon felt a rush of determination. Was it last Christmas Eve? She recalled, memories flooding her mind. Do you also like Christmas trees, Mr. Tae? Yes, he replied, his voice distant. Back then, it was natural that my father was healthy, and I was working under Mr. Tae. She smiled, remembering the joy of that day, before the reality of their current struggles settled back in. There's still a Christmas tree standing in the lobby of KCS Broadcasting. Would you like to come and take a look? She hesitated, half expecting him to decline, But her heart raced at the possibility. Maybe he would come. Asterisk, I should slowly head back. I have tons of work to do. Asterisk, she reminded herself. But as she turned to leave, she heard his voice again. You're still here. For a moment, the world faded away, and it was just the two of them, standing on the precipice of something new. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air, waiting for the right moment to burst forth. Suyeon's heart raced, caught between the thrill of the unknown and the fear of what might come next. Suyeon stared at the door in disbelief. You're still here, Mujin said, a hint of surprise lacing his voice. He had expected her to leave after their earlier encounter, but here she was, lingering as if she were waiting for something more. What are you still doing here? He asked, trying to keep his tone light, but inside, he felt a rush of conflicting emotions. No way, Suyeon thought, her heart pounding in her chest. Was she actually disappointed? I finished shooting that scene, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, as she tried to suppress her excitement. That's great, he replied, trying to sound enthusiastic, though he could feel the awkwardness in the air. Why won't she even look at me? The tension was palpable, and he could sense her discomfort. Don't you know who I am? I know. You're actor IGCO, she replied, a flicker of recognition lighting up her eyes. So you know? Mujin exclaimed, relieved. From your reaction, I thought you didn't. He was about to step away when IG called to him. Mujin, we need to go. Oh, do you have a pen? Mujin asked, suddenly nervous. Suyeon felt a spark of hope. Was he going to give her his autograph? She didn't want to refuse him, especially not after the effort she had put into getting that toy tiger. Wait, I only have one pen with me. This is... Her voice trailed off as she reluctantly handed him her father's cherished pen, a deep sense of nostalgia washing over her. Scritch. The pen went across the paper, leaving behind a signature she would treasure. Thank you. I'll keep this as a souvenir, he said with a smile that made her heart flutter. That's okay with you? She asked, half-heartedly trying to mask the swirl of emotions within. Yes, he replied, and in that moment, the weight of the pen felt heavier, as if it held a piece of her father's legacy. Sorry, that used to be my dad's pen, she blurted out, suddenly feeling exposed. Wait, actor IGCO. A voice behind her broke the moment. Ms. Cheon, Mujin exclaimed, his surprise evident. He really came all the way here? Suyeon thought, her heart racing. Where are you going? She asked, her mind racing with the possibilities of where this could lead. The Christmas trees in the lobby, Mujin said, a hint of nostalgia creeping into his voice. Do you know IGCO? She asked, eager for any insight into the mysterious actor. Sorry, he replied, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. No, he just gave me his autograph. He gave her his number, came a voice from the side, filled with jealousy. Crumple. The sound echoed in her mind as Mujin's expression darkened. Asterisk IGCO? How dare he hit on her? Asterisk, I'll take this, Mujin said curtly, swiping the signed paper as if it were a trophy. Okay, she replied, unsure of how to navigate this sudden turn of events. Is Mujin a fan of IGCO? I never imagined, she muttered, caught off guard by the sudden drama unfolding around her. Have you eaten? Mujin asked, trying to shift the conversation. Did your schedule finish nearby? Well, Suyeon thought, still processing the whirlwind of emotions. NOM, she muttered, taking a bite of her sandwich, feeling awkward in the bustling sandwich store. It's weird sitting here with you at a sandwich store, Mujin observed, his voice taking on a reflective tone. Is it? We had sandwiches often when we worked late, but I can't do that anymore now. Just last Christmas, he recalled, I never imagined I'd be living such a busy life like I am now. The realization struck him hard as he took in how exhausted Suyeon looked. How did I not notice sooner? He felt a surge of determination. I guess I could at least give her some words of encouragement. Just then, Mujin's phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. Oh, it's my university friend I was supposed to meet. Mind if I take this? Go ahead, Suyeon said, watching as he answered the call, her heart heavy with anticipation. Hello, Mujin said, his voice low and contemplative. He wondered how long he would be stuck in this cycle of work. Will it all end if I just get married to the woman my father chooses for me? But even as he entertained that thought, his heart resisted. Then will it all end if I tell Suyeon how I feel? His pride held him back, and he feared she would reject him. How is Mr. Tae? He thought, reflecting on his mentor. He's someone I greatly respect. But deep down, he wondered if he was merely an object of admiration for his career achievements. Cringe, he thought. Asterisk, I know we just have a work relationship, but can't you just like me for who I am as a person? My world would become a beautiful place. Asterisk. Mujin sighed, feeling the weight of expectation settle heavily on his shoulders. Anyway, how do I get rid of IGCO? He asked himself, the jealousy bubbling beneath the surface. I'm going to invite Suyeon Cheon over, he announced, a flicker of determination crossing his face. Why would you invite her? Someone off to the side questioned, surprise evident in their tone. Look at his face. Mujin replied, exasperated. Why else? Imagine what a hard time she must be going through with that mute. He steeled himself, determined to offer her comfort. I'll invite her and give her some words of advice. Don't, came a stern voice, cutting through his thoughts. Why are you meddling in this? What's she got to do with you? Mujin clenched his fists, his heart racing as he wondered what this person was scheming this time. Miss Cheon, where are you? He called, breaking into a sprint. I'm at the hospital to see my dad before heading to the office, she replied, her voice distant. What can I do for you, Mr. Tae? She asked, her tone polite but weary. My father will get in touch with you soon, saying he'd like to invite you over. When he does, you must decline. Excuse me? I couldn't possibly do that, she protested, a hint of panic lacing her voice. Groan. Mujin felt frustration bubble to the surface. Even Ms. Cheon's not cooperating. You can do it, so do as I say, he insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. But why would I? She asked, confusion etched across her face. Mr. Tae, you're the only one in this country who's allowed to do that to the chairman of Taesung Group, she replied, incredulous. I have no choice but to kowtow for Jaein. Mujin felt the pressure mounting, knowing the weight of his family's expectations. Don't worry, Mr. Tae. Your father won't be able to use me to give you a hard time, she reassured him, but he could see the concern flickering in her eyes. No, your existence itself is a threat to me, he exclaimed, frustration pouring out. Miss Cheon, you don't need to go along with what my father says. Just say you're sick and... Wait, stop there. The air crackled with tension as the weight of their unspoken feelings hung heavy, teetering on the edge of something more profound than either of them could grasp. Wait, stop there, Mujin called out, his voice echoing through the hospital corridor. His heart raced as he spotted the figure trying to slip away. Mr. Tae, I'm sorry, but I'll call you later, Suyeon managed to say, her face flushed with embarrassment as she turned to leave. Wait, what's going on? Mujin pressed, urgency creeping into his tone. Ms. Cheon, he shouted, frustration mounting as he realized he had no intention of letting her go so easily. Hey, stop this minute. His eyes locked onto the figure slipping away. Asterisk Sumin star. That was definitely Sumin, he muttered, frustration simmering beneath the surface. Asterisk, you think running away from me is going to solve everything? Asterisk. Stop, he shouted, determination fueling his voice. But the urgency faded as he glanced down at his own foot, pain shooting through his ankle. Asterisk, I sprained my ankle and even let Sumin get away. What a horrible day it is, asterisk, he thought, letting out a long sigh. Or maybe it's just me who's unlucky. Hello? Where are you, Miss Cheon? He asked, trying to keep his focus despite the throbbing pain. The hospital. Where in the hospital? He pressed, eager to find her. Near the emergency exit. Mr. Tae? What are you? Suyeon's voice trailed off as he appeared in her line of sight. Why aren't you at the office? He huffed, the adrenaline from the chase still pumping through his veins. Did you fall on the stairs? She asked, concern knitting her brow. I did, but it's not that bad, he replied, trying to downplay his injury. Mr. Tae, she said, concern deepening in her voice. It's best you don't use your injured foot. I'll take you to the doctor. So tell me what happened. Okay. Am I not heavy? He asked, feeling a mix of gratitude and guilt as she approached him to help. Don't worry about it, Suyeon reassured him. Fortunately, There are no fractures, only some ligament damage. I'll put you in a cast, so make sure to be careful until you recover." The doctor's words hung in the air, bringing both relief and a sense of impending confinement. "Thank you, Mr. Tae," she said, her eyes softening. "Don't you need to go back to the office now?" he asked, trying to change the subject, aware of how much work lay ahead. "While I'm here, I'll go see Chairman Tae," she replied, her expression shifting slightly. "Plus, if Sumin shows up again, you can't chase him with that foot. If he really does show up again, please stop him and teach him a lesson," Mujin said, anger flaring at the thought of Sumin. "That should help him get his head on straight," she quipped, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "So I can beat him up?" he asked, a smirk creeping onto his face, fueled by adrenaline. Gasp. "What? No, you can't," she exclaimed, horrified at the thought. "And you're the only one who's come to see my father twice in the hospital," she said, her voice trailing off as she looked away. "Maybe everyone thinks he won't be able to get out of here," she added, a hint of bitterness creeping into her tone. "Huh? Chairman Cheon will be able to leave this place," Mujin said, trying to lighten the mood. "Grim," she replied, her voice thick with apprehension. "When my father wakes up, you'll be the first one to know." "Tisk, how unladylike," Mujin teased, attempting to ease the tension. "Sorry," Suyeon shot back, raising an eyebrow. "Mr. Huang, how would you like it if I said you got hurt because you're old?" Mujin retorted, a mischievous grin on his face. "What?" Huang's voice came from behind, surprise coloring his features. "Let's keep our manners within the company," Suyeon interrupted, her tone serious. "I'd like our executives to be role models." "Ms. Cheon, is your foot okay?" a colleague asked, concern evident in their voice. "Fume, Suyeon muttered, pushing herself to her feet. "No fractures, so I'll recover soon. Don't worry. By the way, I got some snacks since we're all working late tonight." "Please have some," she added, attempting to lighten the atmosphere despite the pain in her ankle. "It's definitely troublesome to walk like this, but with so many reform requests having been made thanks to Jane's long history," she explained, her voice strained. "I couldn't be resting home alone when the entire reform team's this busy. The workday's ending later than usual because I took a half day off in the morning. I've had a huge backlog of work since the morning, so Suyeon must be at home," Mujin thought, a sense of worry creeping in. "What? Why isn't she resting when she's injured? How do I get her to go home?" "Then can you give me a tour of Jane?" he suggested, desperate for a distraction from his own pain. "Done. This should make her leave," he thought, a smirk crossing his face. "I doubt she'll want to stay so late at night to tend to her ex-boss." "Okay, come over," he said, but doubt lingered in his mind. "Does she mean it?" "Excuse me? Who's coming?" "Why would Mr. Tae?" Suyeon asked, her expression shifting from surprise to curiosity. "He said he wants a tour of Jaen," a voice replied, a hint of excitement in their tone. "Really? Of all times now? This late at night?" Suyeon exclaimed, disbelief written all over her face. "Maybe he feels more comfortable when the employees are gone," the voice suggested, laughter dancing in their eyes. "What is she?" Mujin wondered, confusion swirling in his mind. "I have no idea," Suyeon muttered as she reached the entrance. "Here he is. Welcome to Jaen, Mr. Tae. So you'd like a tour of—" "Immediately. Time to go home." "Pardon?" Suyeon stared at him, bewildered. "Why did you accept your ex-boss's nonsense this late at night? From now on, if you leave the office after 8 p.m. before that leg of yours recovers, I'll get off work and come straight to Jaen," Mujin said firmly, concern etching his features. "Do you understand?" Suyeon blinked in surprise, a mix of frustration and admiration bubbling within her. In that moment, she realized how much he cared for her well-being, despite the chaos surrounding them. "From now on, if you leave the office after 8 p.m. before that leg of yours recovers, I'll get off work and come straight to Jaen. Do you understand?" Mujin declared, his voice carrying a mix of authority and genuine concern. He wasn't about to let Suyeon push herself too hard, even if it meant being the bad guy. "I totally agree with that." She exclaimed, surprised by his unexpected support. "What?" Mujin raised an eyebrow, taken aback by her enthusiastic response. "Then I look forward to your updates from now on," Suyeon replied, a playful smile creeping across her face. Yes, sir. Mujin chuckled, a sense of relief washing over him. She was strong, but even strong people needed a break sometimes. Excuse me? I'm her boss. Mr. Chong interjected, eyeing Mujin with a hint of indignation. Well, it's true you've been working too hard these days. Mujin shot back, unwilling to back down. He could see the fatigue etched on Suyeon's face. Asterisk, so you're calling it a day then, right? Let me bring you your belongings, Miss Cheon. Asterisk, Chong offered, his tone softening as he recognized the toll her hard work had taken. I'll be heading home as well. Get home safely, Mujin added, watching her carefully. You came all the way here just to tell me this? Suyeon asked, her brow furrowed. Did you forget I'm Jaehyun's largest shareholder? It seems you get a huge satisfaction from being the leader wherever you go, Mujin replied, a teasing tone in his voice. It's not like that, you go. I still appreciate your concern, though, she murmured, her cheeks slightly flushed. Mr. Tae seems to be taking special care of you, Chong remarked, shooting a curious glance between them. Does it look like that? Suyeon stammered, suddenly feeling shy under their scrutiny. Don't you think so, Mr. Chong? Mujin pressed, an amused smile playing on his lips. Let's stop talking nonsense and go home, Chong said, rolling his eyes as he changed the subject. What happened to your foot? Did you get in an accident or something? This is so embarrassing, Suyeon sighed, avoiding their gaze. No, I was chasing after my brother who left home, and asterisk handsome Sumin left home. Asterisk, you guys were really close in university, weren't you? Chong raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Did something happen? Mujin's curiosity piqued, but Suyeon quickly shifted her focus away from her brother. My dad's in the hospital now because he was in an accident, she confessed, her voice tinged with worry. So I'm in charge of his company right now. Oh, so when you were talking about work, it meant, Mujin realized, piecing it together. Yeah, I'm the CEO of my dad's company right now. Do you think you can help me with some product placements? You guys have the highest ratings these days, Suyeon asked, her business instincts kicking in despite her injury. Asterisk, nope. Asterisk, the scriptwriter has full authority at the moment, Mujin responded. You saw how it was that day. There's no way they'll edit a scenario just for some product placements. So, that's it? Just like this? Suyeon said, disappointment flashing in her eyes. That's a pity, Mujin admitted, feeling a bit helpless. How about you try and work something out with IGCO, he suggested. The writer has no control over the personal items he wears on the shoot, so you should be able to get the exposure you want. And it'll definitely grab people's attention. I can at least help set up a meeting. So how about it? Want to meet IGCO? Mujin offered, eager to help her find a solution. Asterisk, IGCO. Let me think about it. Asterisk. You haven't changed a bit, Suyeon remarked, her eyes sparkling with familiarity. What do you mean? Mujin asked, confused but amused. You're just too darn pretty, she said, biting her lip, caught in a moment of vulnerability. Emotional, beautiful, he thought, feeling a flush of warmth spread across his cheeks. I haven't even been told what he meant exactly by that, and now this? Suyeon sighed, her embarrassment palpable. Ugh. Mujin groaned. Sigh. Jong-suk, I am pretty, right? Huh? What are you saying all of a sudden? Jong-suk replied, bewildered by the turn in the conversation. Nothing. Sorry. Darn excess inventory. Suyeon grumbled, shaking her head in frustration. The biggest problem to deal with when running the company was excess inventory. Of course, it would be best if we could sell all of our bags, but to hope for that wasn't realistic. And holding sales too often to reduce inventory lowers the value of the brand. What's the initial batch size required? In order to minimize our inventory, she mused, her mind racing with calculations. I'll need to analyze the data a bit more, she decided, pulling out her notebook. Asterisk. Hello, asterisk. Ms. Cheon. How are you? A familiar voice broke through her thoughts. I'm calling because I'd like to invite you over to my place. The time has finally come, Suyeon thought, excitement bubbling within her. I'm sorry. I have a foot injury, so... Oh no. What happened? I fell on the stairs, she admitted, feeling a pang of guilt. I'm sorry to hear that. But rather than spending your birthday alone, especially when you're injured, don't you think it would be better to enjoy a bowl of seaweed soup here at my house? How did he know my birthday is coming up so soon? Suyeon wondered, her heart racing at the thought. Well, wait. Will I be able to spend my birthday together with Mr. Tae? Asterisk. Then what time should I? Good choice, Miss Cheon. Just come for dinner, and you don't need to bring anything. Well, take care of yourself until then. As the call ended, Suyeon felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with anxiety. She had accepted the invitation, even though Mr. Tae had told her to refuse. What if I go and get in trouble? But still, if she could spend her birthday with him, that would be the best gift ever. Ms. Cheon will be joining us for dinner next week, Mujin announced, a sense of satisfaction in his tone. I'm sure her injured leg hasn't healed yet. And how do you know that? Jong-suk interjected, looking between them. So you two do keep in touch, he added, a teasing lilt in his voice. That day's her birthday, Mujin continued, his gaze softening. She's alone right now with no family. So rather than spending her birthday all alone, I thought it would be better to invite her over. Do you plan to torture her here? Jong-suk joked, raising an eyebrow. Birthdays should be spent with people you feel comfortable around. Mujin replied, his voice firm. Torture? Who do you think I'm doing this for? Mujin shot back, his protective instincts kicking in. Asterisk, don't say it's because of me. Because I never asked you to do this, Asterisk, Suyeon said, shaking her head, unsure of how to navigate this tangled web of feelings. I can't eat in this situation, Mujin muttered to himself, frustration bubbling up. I seem to fight more often than usual lately. Why do things get all messed up whenever Suyeon's in the picture? He pondered, a wave of guilt washing over him. Was it a mistake to have pretended I didn't know her back then? Applicant number 7, please enter. Hello. Nice to meet you. I'm Suyeon Cheon. This woman? I know her. Mujin thought, a mix of surprise and recognition flooding over him. As she walked in, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were destined to intertwine once again. In the bustling heart of the city, Suyeon Cheon sat across from a panel of interviewers, her palms clammy, with a mix of anxiety and determination. Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Suyeon Cheon. Her voice carried a trace of confidence, but beneath it lay a tempest of nerves. As she scanned the faces before her, one struck a familiar chord. Wait, where did I see her? A flicker of recognition danced in her mind, but it slipped away before she could grasp it. In the back of her thoughts lingered memories of 4 years ago, a time when she had been just a girl under her father's shadow. Now, at this moment, she felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. Am I ready for this? Suyeon pondered, reflecting on her decision to step away from her father's company, Jaein, to carve her own path at Taesung. Is it correct that your father is Chairman Taejin Cheon of Jaein? The interviewer's question pierced through her thoughts, and she nodded. Yes, it is. Why did you choose Taesung over Jaein? The query seemed loaded, and Suyeon felt the scrutiny. I've lived under my father's wings until now, so I wanted to challenge myself and see how far I could get on my own. As she spoke, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Do they see me as mature enough? She sensed the interviewer's skepticism, a shadow of judgment creeping in. Inside, she steeled herself. I won't let them dismiss me. Please give me the chance to prove myself. I believe that the tougher it is for me, the more valuable the results will be for you. Her heart raced as she sensed the subtle shift in the room. Perhaps they were beginning to see her resolve. But doubt lingered. They need a loyal secretary, not someone who might stir confusion. I can't let them down. Asterisk, asterisk. As the interview continued, Suyeon could feel the weight of her father's legacy on her shoulders. My father always said that the tougher the beginning, the more valuable the outcome. I have to believe that. Asterisk, asterisk, but would they see it that way? Do you know you're less experienced compared to the other candidates? One of the interviewers noted, her words sharp as a knife. I worked as a secretary under my father during every break, Suyeon replied, her voice steady. I simply didn't mention it in my resume, because I helped him out without pay. The room fell silent for a moment. They need to know that I'm not just the daughter of Chairman Cheon. The silence was deafening, and she could feel the interviewer's eyes piercing through her. The questions shifted to her father's reputation in the business world, and she noted how they perked up at the mention of him. How do you assess Taesung? Taesung has its own path it must walk, just as Jaein has its own path, Suyeon replied carefully, realizing the implications of her words. She knew they were measuring her against her father's legacy. Hiring her wouldn't be a mistake as long as she's only half of what Chairman Cheon was. One of the interviewers mused, and Suyeon felt a flicker of pride mixed with the weight of expectation. The meeting concluded, and as Suyeon stepped outside, she took a deep breath. The sun felt warm on her skin, and for a moment, hope flickered in her heart. Maybe I can do this. As she returned to her desk at Taesung, the ringing phone interrupted her thoughts. "Good morning, Mr. Tae." His voice came through the line, steady and reassuring. "I received an invitation from Chairman Cheon. You can decline if you wish." "Oh no. I was wondering what kind of gift I should prepare for him." Suyeon's voice danced between eagerness and anxiety, caught in the throes of her approaching birthday. "What kind of gift is appropriate for my own father?" "Just come as you are," he replied. "He's worrying about someone else's gift on her own birthday," Suyeon noted with a hint of amusement, but beneath that humor lay a twinge of unease. "What if I mess this up?" The conversation turned to a potential endorsement deal, and Suyeon felt a rush of excitement. A meeting with IGCO? Her mind raced ahead, visions of the exposure this could bring flooding her thoughts. But as she considered her burgeoning opportunities, a weight settled in her chest. Mr. Tae's intentions were becoming clearer. He was someone she respected, but the idea of him worrying about her meeting with another man left her feeling conflicted. Why does it matter to me so much? As the day wore on, Suyeon faced her inner turmoil. I have to tell him how I feel about him. The thought hung in the air, heavy with possibilities. But what if I ruin everything? She wandered through a shop, the vibrant colors of the bracelets catching her eye. "I'd like to look at some bracelets," she requested, her heart pounding. "Should I gift wrap this one?" "Yes." As the cashier wrapped the bracelet, Suyeon realized that the choice of gift was insignificant compared to what lay beneath. Her heart raced with the knowledge that soon, she would have to confront her feelings head-on. What if he doesn't feel the same? In that moment, a wave of determination surged within her. She made a decision, no more hiding. It's time to express what's in my heart. Asterisk, asterisk. And with that resolve, she left the store, ready to embrace whatever came next. Underneath the shimmering lights of the city, a new chapter was unfolding in Mujin's life. He had made a decision, one that sent his heart racing and mind swirling with anticipation. Today, I will confess my feelings for her. It's a profession of love she couldn't possibly reject. Asterisk, asterisk, the thought bolstered his courage, but uncertainty loomed over him like a shadow. As he settled into the familiar ambience of his home, Mujin couldn't shake the feeling that this day felt unreal. "It's my second time, but it still seems surreal," he mused, glancing at the cast still clinging to his leg. It was a bit early to remove it, but the doctor had assured him it was fine, provided he took it easy. "Ms. Cheon," he called, breaking the silence. "Is your leg fully recovered already?" "Yes, it's fine now," she replied, a flicker of relief washing over her face. Yet Mujin couldn't shake off the worry. "You didn't remove it early just to come here, did you?" He felt guilty at the thought. "No, I swear." She seemed earnest, yet her eyes sparkled with mischief as she stepped into the room. "Come in. I'll introduce you to my father." As she entered, Mujin's heart swelled with a mix of admiration and nervousness. "Welcome, Miss Cheon." He greeted her warmly, feeling a rush of affection. "Thank you for inviting me today." Her smile was radiant, brightening the room. "Wow, cake," she exclaimed, her eyes widening. "I should be thanking you for joining us on such a special day." "So it's her birthday today?" Mujin felt a wave of warmth envelop him. The air crackled with anticipation, and he could sense the excitement in the atmosphere. "Why don't you go sit next to her, Mujin? We can't have her lonely on her birthday." Mujin hesitated, a knot forming in his stomach. "She'll feel uncomfortable if I sit next to her." "Is that so, Miss Cheon?" he asked, testing the waters. "Oh, of course not. I'd love it," she replied, her voice a tad too enthusiastic, and he couldn't help but chuckle at her eagerness. "See? She wants you too." The playful teasing continued. It had always been just him and Mujin at this table, and suddenly it felt liberating to have her there. Mujin felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders. This is nice, he thought, relishing the light-hearted atmosphere. As the cake was served, Mujin took a moment to observe Suyeon, who was beaming as she savored the sweet treat. He couldn't help but think how hard it must be for her. Wouldn't it be better to have someone you could rely on by your side? He ventured, curious about her thoughts. My employees are helping me out a lot now, she replied, but he could sense the tinge of loneliness in her voice. But they're not like family, he pressed gently. Finding someone to marry would be a lot more reliable. The weight of her gaze made Mujin realize how vulnerable he had just made her feel. I'll think about marriage once my father wakes up, she responded, a hint of sadness in her tone. But you don't know when that'll be. Now. We have cake, so please enjoy, he interjected, trying to lighten the mood. Do you like sweet stuff, Miss Cheon? Thank you. The cake's really beautiful, she smiled, her eyes sparkling with appreciation. I made it a bit more special because it's your birthday, Mujin confessed, feeling proud. What about you, Mujin? Anything for Miss Cheon? Nothing, he replied, trying to sound resolute, even though he was secretly regretting not preparing something special for her. I'll pack some of the cake for you when you go home, she promised, and his heart soared at the thought. As the chatter continued, Mujin felt a bittersweet pang in his chest. I give him a chance, and he throws it away like this. The idea of not fully seizing this moment nagged at him. Make sure to come to Mujin's wedding, Miss Cheon, he teased lightly, but a part of him wondered if she would ever truly be there beside him. Come on, I'll give you a tour of the house, Mujin said, guiding her through the hallways, which felt like a mix of nostalgia and longing. You can lie down, so feel free to kill some time here before you go home. Staying next to my father, you'll just have more sucking up to do. No, I actually enjoy talking to him, she shot back, a glint of playfulness in her eyes. Liar, Mujin chuckled inwardly, appreciating her spirit. Lying down, Suyeon appeared more relaxed, and Mujin noted how the tension seemed to melt away from her frame. She must have been tired. Maybe she didn't get enough sleep because of work, ***. As he watched her, a thought crossed his mind. Have I ever bought a woman's gift in my life? The idea of presenting her with something special stirred his heart, and he wondered what expression would grace her face when he finally revealed his feelings. Ms. Cheon, he whispered, barely able to contain his excitement, but suddenly, guilt washed over him. Crap! He had dressed up nicely for her birthday celebration. Yet here he was, stealing a moment to gather his thoughts while she lay asleep. How could I make such a mistake? His heart raced as he wondered if she would wake up soon. When do I open my eyes? Ms. Cheon, he called gently, and as she stirred, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Ugh! Haram, she muttered, her eyes blinking open. You're awake, he said, a mix of worry and amusement dancing on his face. Oh gosh! Was I sleeping for a long time? A couple of hours, Mujin replied, trying to suppress his laughter at her surprise. Kya, sorry. It would have been okay even if you'd woken me up, she stammered, and he could sense the awkwardness in her tone. Things have been so hectic at work, and she trailed off, and he felt an ache of empathy for her struggles. Take this, he said suddenly, extending his hand toward her, unsure but determined. What's this? She asked, her brow furrowing with curiosity. You said you didn't get anything before. His heart pounded as he watched her open the small box he had prepared. This is more like a bribe than a gift, she teased, her eyes widening in surprise. A bribe, he asked, his smile widening. I'll help you shoot a commercial with IGCO. He paused, feeling a surge of courage. In return, please be the bride at my wedding. The room seemed to hold its breath as Suyeon stared at him, her expression shifting between disbelief and something else. Hope, perhaps. In that fleeting moment, Mujin felt a rush of exhilaration, for he had finally laid his heart bare before her. Mujin's heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation as he faced Suyeon. I'll help you shoot a commercial with IGCO. In return, please be the bride at my wedding. ***, the words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. Mujin felt a flush creep across his cheeks as he watched her reaction. Stunned disbelief flickered in her eyes. Why you want to marry me? She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Mujin's heart pounded in his chest, a blend of hope and anxiety swirling within him. You can save Jaein with IGCO's commercial, and I'll have a bride to hold my wedding. I believe it's a win-win situation for us. Asterisk, asterisk, the thought lingered in his mind, half-formed yet strangely reassuring. He noticed the skepticism on her face. She must think I'm joking. Me? President Mujin Tae's bride? Asterisk, asterisk, the absurdity of the situation momentarily made him laugh internally, yet a flicker of determination surged within him. Don't worry. I promise I'll draw up a contract, he continued, trying to convey sincerity amidst the ridiculousness of the proposal. A contract? Suyeon echoed, her brows knitting together in confusion. The realization of the nature of his offer slowly dawned on her. He did say it's a bribe, so precisely speaking, it's not the standard marriage proposal. Asterisk, asterisk. Mujin noticed the excitement dim in her eyes, realizing he might have crossed a line. How stupid of me to get excited. Okay, I'll do it, she replied, the hesitation still lingering in her voice. But I don't need the commercial. I'm not doing this because I want something in return, she added firmly. Mujin felt a flicker of frustration ignite within him. Why would you do that when it's a loss for you? This isn't volunteer work. It's a business deal. Asterisk, asterisk. He leaned closer, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. With a single impactful commercial, Jaein could get back on its feet. And you're declining that opportunity? I'm well aware it's an opportunity, Suyeon retorted, her resolve strengthening. But I don't want to shoot the commercial because you made it possible. Mujin sighed, feeling the familiar tension between them. Don't let your emotions get in the way when making decisions for your company, he thought, though he felt the sting of her words. Leave emotions out of business, he managed to say, trying to maintain a level of professionalism. Yet, a familiar glint in Suyeon's eyes reminded him of their shared history, the moments of laughter and camaraderie. The same look and tone as last time. Even after the wedding, you won't be free from people's attention and the rumors they create. That's why I'm offering a condition that's suitable for your trouble, he said, pressing on, determined to clarify his intentions. Are you saying I'll regret it later if I become your bride? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. To avoid that, I'm going to include in the contract a clause that states we'll both be discreet about the fact that we're not a real couple until your father wakes up. With time, people's interest in us will gradually fade. We'll legally be a couple only until then. Mujin held his breath, watching as Suyeon's expression shifted, torn between disbelief and consideration. Who knows when he'll wake up? What if he never does? Asterisk, asterisk. Mr. Cheon will wake up. I know it, Mujin assured her, his voice firm. So trust me and wait. Tears welled in her eyes, and he felt a pang of sympathy for her plight. Thank you. I'll tell my father as soon as the wedding is over, so you don't need to continue your act even after the wedding. I think he'll be furious, Suyeon murmured, a note of fear creeping into her voice. That's his problem to deal with, so don't worry about it, Mujin replied, a sense of determination washing over him. There's a risk you need to take on by going ahead with this wedding, so the commercial is rightful compensation. Will you still refuse? Will you refuse the commercial? He pressed, watching her reaction closely. Suyeon's silence lingered, and he could sense her mind racing through the possibilities. Of course, he's not the type of person to settle matters at the sacrifice of others, she finally conceded. Then I'll accept. You can help me with the commercial. As the agreement settled between them, Mujin felt a rush of relief mixed with an undercurrent of exhilaration. Don't remove this bracelet until our wedding is over, he instructed, holding up the delicate piece of jewelry that felt like a promise tethering them together. It looks so real, she remarked, a soft smile breaking through her initial hesitation. Mr. Tae, I'm really glad that I can be your bride. A warmth flooded Mujin's chest at her words. I'll be by your side in your darkest moments. Don't worry. Asterisk, asterisk. Meanwhile, across the room, the air was thick with curiosity. Mujin's friend, observing the scene unfold, leaned in, trying to catch snippets of their conversation. I think they're talking on the terrace, he whispered to another, the intrigue in his voice undeniable. What's there to talk about still? It's been ages since he left with her, saying he'd show her around the house, came the response, skepticism lacing their words. As they exchanged glances, a shared suspicion blossomed. Something smells fishy. Definitely. Asterisk, asterisk. Come to think of it, there's a lot that's suspicious about her as well. The thought spiraled in the back of his mind. The stark contrast to Gina Yu's scandal, the prior connection between Mujin and Suyeon. Is it really just a coincidence that the same woman became Mujin's secretary? He took a deep breath, feeling a tinge of realization. Mujin is a sucker for Suyeon. Call the wedding coordinator in the secretary's office right now. Tell her we finally found Mujin's bride. As the realization settled in, a wave of excitement coursed through him, knowing this was just the beginning of their journey together, fraught with challenges and hopes alike. Later, as Suyeon re-entered the room, she felt the weight of the decision she had made. I'll go many places with him. I want to get to know him better, what he likes and dislikes, asterisk, asterisk. The thought brought a smile to her face, though a flicker of doubt lingered. If this contract marriage acts as an excuse for me to become more intimate with him, she mused, envisioning a path filled with new experiences and perhaps a deeper connection than either had anticipated. The journey ahead promised uncertainty, but for the first time in a long while, it also shimmered with the light of possibility. Suyeon stood in Mujin's office, trying to steady herself as she stared at the contract in front of her. The words marriage contract felt surreal on the page, like they belonged in someone else's life. Yet here she was, preparing for a wedding that was anything but real. Mujin, ever the composed businessman, glanced up from his desk. Read it and tell me if anything bothers you. I'll fix it. His voice was calm, almost nonchalant, as if they were merely discussing a regular business deal. Suyeon let out a quiet sigh. To put so much energy into a fake wedding. How funny this situation is. She shook her head at the absurdity of it all. Didn't you have any regrets while drawing up this contract, Mr. Tae? She asked, her tone a little sharper than she intended. Why would I? Mujin leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. There are lots of women from far better families around me. Suyeon couldn't help but scoff internally. Of course, it's not like this is a real marriage, but I won't be regretting anything, he continued. So you make sure to read the contract thoroughly, so you don't have any regrets. Rumors could spread, Suyeon thought, her mind racing. What would people think if they knew about this arrangement? Was she really ready for this? Before she could spiral any further, Mujin's voice broke her thoughts. Is there a problem? She quickly shook her head. No, not really. Good. His voice had the finality of someone accustomed to closing deals. Suyeon exhaled deeply, relieved yet unsettled. Perhaps even the marriage is just to keep his reputation, she mused, feeling a strange mix of emotions about the whole situation. A fake marriage to a man like Mujin, and yet here they were, signing contracts like it was just another business venture. As she mulled over the document, her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. A secretary entered, looking slightly nervous. The bride for President Tae's wedding, she said, holding a note in her hand. Suyeon's eyes widened. What? It's a direct order from the chairman, the secretary explained. The chairman? Suyeon's heart skipped a beat. Did he find out that Mr. Tae asked me to be his bride? Wait, Mr. Tae asked me only for a wedding, but what the chairman wants is a real bride. Asterisk, asterisk. A wave of panic coursed through her. If Mr. Tae finds out that his father recommended me as his bride, he might break off the deal. After all, he could end up with me for real when he only wanted a fake wedding. Asterisk, asterisk. The secretary shifted awkwardly. I know this comes as a surprise, Suyeon, but Suyeon could barely focus on her words. Should I tell Mr. Tae about this? What do? I don't have to sign a contract today, do I? Asterisk, asterisk. Why? Mujin's voice broke through her internal turmoil. Suyeon blinked, realizing he had asked her something. Because you should be prudent when it comes to contracts, she said, her voice faltering. He raised an eyebrow. Do you think I'm forcing you to sign an unfair contract? And no, that's not it, Suyeon stammered. He'll get the wrong end of the stick. I just think there's something that needs to be added to the contract. Mujin's eyes narrowed. Like what? Suyeon's mind raced. Think of something, Suyeon. Physical contact, she blurted out, immediately regretting her words. Of all things, Mujin's expression shifted into one of mild amusement. So, are you saying you don't want me to touch you? No, she said, flustered and panicking. What have I done? Mujin leaned in slightly, still curious. So you want me to? No, Suyeon exclaimed, practically choking on her own words. It's not because I doubt you, Mr. Tae. It's just that it's good to be cautious. Mujin chuckled softly, a hint of playfulness in his tone. Please behave the same way with other men. Suyeon could feel her face heating up. Don't leave a single detail out, Suyeon. Make sure I have no way out. Asterisk, asterisk. I'll make the revision and get back to you, she managed, her voice barely steady. Mujin nodded. We can meet here again. A silence settled between them until Mujin casually asked, Ms. Cheon, have you already eaten dinner? Caught off guard, Suyeon shook her head. No. Why? He smiled faintly. Would you be at your poker club if you hadn't met me today? She raised an eyebrow. Probably. Mujin seemed amused. He's pretty consistent with that club. Suyeon hesitated before asking. But is there a special reason? Mujin's face darkened slightly. Some bad rumors are going around about one of the members. She bit her lip, curiosity piqued. Can I come with you sometime? His answer was immediate and firm. No. Suyeon felt a small wave of indignation. Don't tell me I can't because I'm a woman, she challenged, her voice rising slightly. Mujin smirked. It's because you don't know how to fight, Ms. Cheon. Her brow furrowed, and she crossed her arms defensively. And why is it you think that? He leaned back in his chair, his tone teasing. If you want to come, you'll have to beat me at something first. Suyeon met his gaze, the challenge stirring something competitive in her. Okay, fine. What will it be? Mujin's expression shifted slightly. Let's make it Mr. Huang. She blinked. You mean Mr. Huang at Gaon? Mujin's voice grew serious. He contacted me and asked me to have dinner with him. Suyeon felt a chill run down her spine. Why would Mr. Huang contact you? Mujin shrugged. Maybe he wants my Gaon stocks. Her heart raced. He's not going to sell them, is he? You said you could beat me, Mujin said, his voice lowering. So try stopping Mr. Huang. Suyeon swallowed hard, the weight of the challenge sinking in. This wasn't just about a poker club or a fake marriage anymore. It was about navigating the dangerous waters of business and personal alliances. Could she really play this game and come out on top? Only time would tell. Suyeon's heart raced as she stood before Chairman Tae, her palms slightly damp from the pressure. The weight of their conversation clung to the air like a storm about to break. She had asked the chairman for one thing, control. Control over her own wedding. You're not going to sell them to him, are you? She blurted out, her voice faltering as her thoughts betrayed her calm demeanor. Chairman Tae offered her a small, almost paternal smile. I'm sure you must have been quite surprised, Ms. Cheon. His tone was calm, yet held an authority she couldn't ignore. I appreciate your positive consideration of me, he continued, as if the whole matter was already decided in his favor. Positive consideration? Suyeon thought. More like careful self-preservation. She wasn't just dealing with any man. This was the chairman of a powerful conglomerate, and her future, in more ways than one, was wrapped up in this conversation. You must have heard why I called you here today, he went on, watching her carefully. I'd like Mujin to have someone reliable by his side. He tries to handle everything by himself. Suyeon swallowed. Reliable, was that really how they saw her? Or was she just a convenient option in a complicated business maneuver? Can you be that person by his side, Ms. Cheon? The chairman's words lingered in the air like a challenge, but Suyeon had learned how to navigate such propositions. If I say yes, she began carefully, measuring her words, can you leave the wedding completely up to me and Mr. Tae? The chairman chuckled. Why, of course. After all, it's your wedding. Suyeon nodded slowly, her mind already calculating the next move. Then can you also not tell Mr. Tae that you first brought up the issue of marriage to me? Chairman Tae raised an eyebrow in surprise, but there was a glint of understanding in his eyes. Because you know him well. If he knows I chose you, that'll arouse animosity in him. He nodded, his expression softening. That does make sense. He's never been happy with any of the women I introduced him to. Suyeon inwardly sighed with relief. At least he understands that much. Then, should I personally speak to Mr. Tae about our marriage? she asked hesitantly. The chairman smiled, his eyes lighting up. You? I'd appreciate it if you did. His voice was lighter now, clearly pleased with the direction their conversation was taking. But as Suyeon left the meeting, a new weight settled on her shoulders. I decided to keep both facts a secret, she thought. She couldn't tell Chairman Tae about her private deal with Mujin, and she certainly couldn't let Mujin know that his father had chosen her first. But at least this way, the chairman won't be giving his son a hard time until the wedding. Later that evening, Suyeon found herself nervously pacing in her room. What was I thinking? She chastised herself. She didn't regret the decision she had made with the chairman, but it had only complicated things further. When Mujin arrived, she could tell from his face that something was on his mind. Welcome, President Tae, she greeted him nervously. Please have a seat. Mujin's gaze lingered on her, as though searching for something unsaid. Thank you for coming all the way here, he said smoothly, though his voice held an edge. I think Ms. Cheon said some negative things about me. His words stung with an accusation that caught her off guard. Suyeon blinked, startled. Is he testing me? If you have any misunderstandings about me, he continued, I hope they can be cleared with this drink. Suyeon quickly recovered. Ms. Cheon didn't say a word about you, Mr. Huang, she responded firmly. You're the one who's engaging in slander. The tension in the room spiked, but Mujin just laughed, a short, mirthless sound. Ahem. He cleared his throat, clearly not expecting her to call him out so directly. Mujin leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. Why don't you sell your Jane shares to me at a marked-up price, President Tae? Surely they don't make much of a difference to your portfolio. Suyeon felt her stomach knot at the suggestion. He's testing him now. Then how about a threefold markup? Mujin offered with a sly grin. Threefold? Suyeon muttered under her breath. I swear the rich ones are greedy. She had to find a way to stop this, or she feared Mujin might actually consider the deal. Mujin smirked. I found out Mr. Taejin Cheon covered up for you once when the company suffered a huge loss because of you. His words were like sharp knives, and Suyeon could see the way Mujin's expression darkened. I see now the chairman made a mistake, Mujin continued. Ms. Cheon is still young and doesn't know much about the company. Suyeon clenched her fists. He's insulting me now too? How could you appoint her as CEO because of your past relationship with her? Mujin added, his voice dripping with venom. Suyeon had heard enough. I think you made the mistake, President Tae, she said, her voice firm and unwavering. As Suyeon stormed out of the room, her mind raced. I'm late trying to find out where these two are meeting, but who knew it was where I entertained him? Such bad taste. Asterisk, she muttered to herself, growing anxious. What do I do now? I need to stop him from selling his shares, at least to Mr. Huang. Asterisk. Before she could gather her thoughts, there was a loud crash. She rushed in to find Mujin standing over Mr. Huang, his face contorted with rage. You're where you are at that age because you were lucky to be born to your parents. Mujin shouted, his voice echoing through the room. How dare you ask an elder threefold the price? Threefold? Suyeon's heart pounded in her chest. She was too late. Later, as they stumbled out into the rainy night, Suyeon kept close to Mujin, who was clearly pretending to be sober. It's raining, he muttered, glancing at the sky. Suyeon quickly covered him with her umbrella. What are you doing here? She asked softly. Mujin paused, looking at her, then smiled. Do you want to go see some stars? Suyeon blinked. Those are oddly familiar words. The night she had been drunk replayed in her mind. What did I say back then? Before she could respond, Mujin took her hand. Come with me. Let's go stargazing. As the rain gently pattered against the car windows, Suyeon couldn't help but feel baffled by Mujin's sudden insistence. He was seated beside her, his eyes half-lidded from the effects of the alcohol, yet his voice was filled with conviction. Have you gone stargazing before, Mr. Tae? Suyeon asked, tilting her head with curiosity as she tried to gauge his intention. Mujin shook his head, his messy hair falling over his forehead. No, he replied, his voice oddly serene. But why not now? Suyeon blinked in surprise. In a place as far as Gaon? She muttered, casting a glance at the rainy skies outside. He's really drunk. We'll see stars in Gaon, Mujin insisted, almost like a child with a far-fetched dream, ignoring the reality of the downpour. It's too far this late at night, Suyeon reasoned, trying to ground him. But Mujin was persistent. I still want to go. Don't you? He asked, his eyes meeting hers with a strange intensity that made her heart race. Why does he seem so certain about this? Before Suyeon could protest further, they had arrived. Stepping out, she realized the rain had stopped. Mujin beamed up at the clear sky, and to her astonishment, the stars shone brightly overhead. Look at all those stars, he murmured, his voice filled with awe. Suyeon found herself momentarily stunned, not by the stars, but by Mujin's expression. He looked vulnerable, almost childlike, as he gazed upwards. I used to come here often with my dad and brother, to gaze at the stars, he confessed quietly, his voice tinged with nostalgia. But now, I don't think we can do that anymore. His words hung in the air, and Suyeon caught the flicker of pain in his voice. He misses them, she realized. Before she could respond, Mujin suddenly muttered, Sumin, that idiot. Her heart clenched. Is he crying? She wondered, glancing at him cautiously. But Mujin quickly brushed off her concern. No, he said, his voice soft. I think I have an eyelash in my eye. Let me see. Suyeon offered instinctively, moving closer. But as soon as she did, she regretted it. His face is too close. Her breath hitched as their proximity made her painfully aware of her pounding heart. Open your eyes, Mujin murmured, his voice low. He leaned in even closer, and before Suyeon could pull away, he gently blew into her eye. A shiver ran down her spine. Is it better now? He asked, his face still inches from hers. Suyeon swallowed hard. Mr. Tae, can you please let go of my face now? She whispered, her voice trembling slightly. For a moment, Mujin didn't move, and Suyeon wondered if he had hurt her at all. But then, with a soft exhale, he released her, as if coming out of a trance. As they drove back, Suyeon couldn't stop the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. Why Gaepyeong? The question nagged at her. It was such an odd place to go at such an hour. Mr. Tae, where are we going? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Gaepyeong, Mujin replied simply, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. You get a really pretty view of the stars there. You wouldn't know since you've lived only in the city. Suyeon felt a warmth bloom in her chest. I wanted to see this sky with you. The unspoken words lingered in the air, and her cheeks flushed, realizing the meaning behind them. Mr. Tae, are you still drunk? She asked softly, her voice betraying the confusion she felt. Probably, he admitted with a faint smile, not bothering to deny it. You need to go to work tomorrow. It's already midnight, Suyeon pointed out, trying to steer them back to reality. Mujin stayed silent for a moment, then turned to her. Let's go back to Seoul. The drive back was quiet, with only the hum of the car and the distant sound of the rain accompanying them. Suyeon's mind, however, was far from still. What was that? She wondered, her fingers nervously tapping on her lap. Was it because he was drunk? But do people say things like that just because they're drunk? Asterisk, her heart wavered, torn between disbelief and the lingering warmth of hope. I don't want to be let down again, she thought bitterly. But I can't forget it. Stop thinking about it. Stop. Asterisk. They arrived at her apartment, and Suyeon turned to Mujin. Thank you for the ride. It's really late. Mujin gave her a lingering look before speaking. Why don't you sleep at my place tonight? Suyeon's eyes widened in shock. Was he serious? It's okay. Don't worry. I'm not asking you to sleep in the same bed with me, he added quickly, noticing her startled expression. Suyeon let out a nervous laugh. I need to go to work early tomorrow, Mr. Tae. You need a good night's sleep. Cool me. Let's go inside, Mujin insisted. His voice was gentle but firm. Suyeon hesitated but followed him, her feet moving on their own as her thoughts swirled. Why am I going in? I should have just gone home, but I ended up coming inside because I was at a loss for words. Asterisk. Inside, Mujin's apartment was neat and almost clinical in its tidiness. I've been cleaning the room daily because Sumin might come back any day, Mujin explained offhandedly, his voice soft. Sumin again, Suyeon thought, feeling a pang in her chest. She nodded, unsure of what to say. Don't worry and get a good night's sleep, Mujin continued. You can wear anything in the dressing room over there, and use the bathroom to take a shower. As Mujin stepped into the shower, Suyeon wandered aimlessly around the room, her thoughts a jumble of emotions. I can't believe I'm washing and sleeping at Mujin's place. It felt surreal, almost as though she had crossed a line she hadn't even realized existed. She glanced at the empty bed and sighed, placing the folded clothes she had borrowed from Mujin on the nightstand. She turned to leave, but before she could stop herself, her thoughts drifted back to that moment under the stars. The closeness, the words he had spoken. She shook her head, determined to push the feelings aside. But deep down, she knew that no matter how hard she tried, she wouldn't be able to forget it. Late at night, Suyeon tiptoed through Mujin's apartment, her mind in turmoil after everything that had transpired. She quietly left the honey water she had brought for him on the nightstand and turned to leave. But just as she was about to step out, her eyes caught something she hadn't expected. Mujin, half-dressed and fresh from the shower, his shirt unbuttoned. Her breath hitched, and her cheeks immediately flushed with embarrassment. I came to give you some honey water," she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. Mujin turned around, startled but calm, as if he hadn't realized what had just happened. "Okay, so please leave," he said softly, his gaze unwavering. Suyeon's eyes widened in horror as she processed what she had just seen. "Oh, of course," she blurted, spinning on her heels and rushing out of the room. Her heart pounded in her chest. What did I just see? As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, she leaned against the wall, her hands covering her face. No wonder he looked so good in a suit. Stop it, stop. No more. Asterisk, asterisk, she shook her head, trying to erase the image from her mind, but it was no use. It kept replaying, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. He really has everything except me. She groaned in frustration, hoping Mujin hadn't thought she had done it intentionally. It was good eye candy, sure, she thought with a flush of shame, but I'd hate for him to think that I was some kind of pervert. She let out a long sigh. So much for sleep tonight. The next morning, Suyeon could barely look Mujin in the eyes. She was sitting at the breakfast table, trying to act normal, when a cheerful voice broke through her thoughts. "Oh my, did you both not get enough sleep?" their housekeeper asked with a warm smile, noting their tired faces. Startled, Suyeon nearly dropped her spoon. It's not that," she stammered. "We just came home late, so we didn't get much rest." Mujin, sitting across from her, gave a small nod but said nothing, sipping his coffee. Was he embarrassed too? Suyeon couldn't tell. His face was unreadable, calm as always. "Well, you'll both be tired all day at work then," the housekeeper teased lightly, setting down a steaming bowl of dried pollock soup. "I heard you had drinks last night, so I prepared this for you." The smell of the soup filled the room, comforting but not enough to ease Suyeon's nerves. She peeked at Mujin, trying to gauge his mood. I can't believe I saw him like that. Every time she thought about it, her cheeks burned all over again. As Mujin started eating, he cleared his throat, his voice softer than usual. "I'm sorry about last night." Suyeon's breath caught in her throat, and she nearly choked on her soup. "Cough. You must have been really surprised," he added, looking at her with an apologetic expression. Suyeon waved her hands, desperate to brush it off. "Let's not talk about that," she muttered, feeling her face grow hotter. Later that day, Suyeon was sitting in a meeting when her mind began to wander again. What was that about? Is he feeling embarrassed? Asterisk, asterisk, she couldn't help but laugh to herself quietly but stopped abruptly. It's over if you laugh. She thought of Mujin's stoic expression during breakfast. He's probably just as flustered as I am. Later that day, Suyeon and Mujin found themselves in another conversation, this time about business. "So, are you going to sell your shares to Mr. Huang?" Mujin asked casually, leaning back in his chair. Suyeon hesitated, then replied, "I will, if he triples the price." Mujin raised an eyebrow, chuckling lightly. "What a bold move," he commented. "Mr. Huang's a tightwad. He'll never buy them at that price." Suyeon smiled, feeling more in control now that they were back on business topics. "I bet he'll offer double to make up for the mistakes he made drunk." Mujin looked thoughtful, but then a teasing smile crept onto his face. You're not going to try harder just to get back at me for seeing me half-naked, are you? Suyeon felt her face flush again. Don't laugh, she said sharply, trying to hide her embarrassment. How does he always manage to catch me off guard? The day continued in a blur of meetings, with Suyeon trying to focus on work. But that one moment from the night before kept sneaking into her thoughts. My relationship with Mr. Tae isn't just a typical ex-boss and subordinate relationship, she mused, knowing that things had become much more complicated lately. Later, back at the office, Mujin confronted Suyeon again about the revised contract. Are you going to drop by every morning until I give you the contract? She asked with a hint of frustration. Mujin leaned in slightly, his usual calm demeanor intact. Yes, he said simply. If you feel uncomfortable going to the office with me, then finalize the contract. Suyeon blinked, not expecting his directness. I actually prefer this, but I can't say that, can I? She muttered to herself, feeling conflicted. Mujin gave her a sideways glance, clearly amused. Then how about we revise it together? He offered. Suyeon looked at him, unsure of his intentions. What do you mean? She asked cautiously. Mujin leaned in a little closer, his gaze steady. Do you think you'll feel uncomfortable if you have physical contact with me? His question hung in the air, heavy and full of implication. Suyeon's heart raced. She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't even sure what he was really asking. If we're going to have a wedding, he continued, his tone serious but soft, our parents will need to meet first. Then, we'll have to get our dress and suit and take wedding photos. But if we act like complete strangers in this process, people might find it strange. Suyeon felt the weight of his words. Mujin was talking about more than just a business arrangement. That's why, in order for us to look like a real couple, a certain level of physical contact is necessary. Suyeon swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. Do I look uncomfortable to you now? She asked, her tone a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. Mujin's eyes softened, but he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gave her a look that told her he understood her hesitation, but wasn't going to push her beyond what she was ready for. Suyeon's heart raced as Mujin's words echoed in her mind. Am I still just your ex-boss to you? He was standing close, so close that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. She tried to keep her composure, but the flush creeping up her neck betrayed her. Stop blushing. It'll be too obvious. Asterisk, her thoughts were in disarray, her chest pounding with emotions she couldn't quite control. She couldn't meet his gaze. Does he know? Does he already know I like him? Asterisk, she wondered, her thoughts spiraling. Is that why he asked me to be his bride at the wedding? Mujin's voice, calm but filled with something unspoken, cut through her thoughts. The reason I asked you to be my bride is because of IGCO, he admitted. There was a strange vulnerability in his words that Suyeon wasn't used to hearing from him. I don't want you to get close to him, the man who's loved by every woman. His expression softened, as if there was more he wanted to say, but couldn't. And I also needed a reason to get close to you like this. Suyeon's breath caught in her throat. He wanted to be close to me. Her mind whirled as she processed his words. Whatever the reason, does it matter? She was pulled back to reality by his voice, now focused on the time. We're going to be late, he said. Did you know? She asked absent-mindedly, her thoughts still tangled in the conversation they just had. Get out, Mujin said abruptly, rummaging through his things. We're not at the office yet, he added, his voice all business again. Before she could process the sudden shift, Mujin made a quick decision. Let's take the subway. We won't make it by car. Suyeon blinked in surprise. The subway? At this hour? Her eyes darted to his tailored suit, already imagining the creases and wrinkles from the crowded train. Your suit will get all wrinkled. We don't have time, he replied, already making his way toward the station. Let's go. They made it to the subway, but as expected, it was packed with people. Suyeon stuck close to Mujin, the crush of the crowd pressing her against him. She could feel the tension in the air as they tried to navigate the tight space. Mujin's jacket was already wrinkling, just as she had feared, but he didn't seem to care. Are you sure you're okay? He asked, glancing down at her. Yes, I'm fine, she lied, though the crowd made it difficult to breathe, let alone think straight. She was hyper-aware of his presence beside her, their arms brushing every time the train swayed. "You can lean on me," he said softly. "It's okay." Suyeon felt a strange mix of emotions flood her. Lean on him? Her mind flashed back to his earlier words, to the subtle confessions hidden between them. But before she could react, the doors opened, and a fresh wave of people surged into the car. "Ah!" Suyeon yelped as she was pushed forward, almost falling. Mujin's arm shot out, steadying her. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "I've got plenty of space here." As the train continued to rattle down the tracks, Suyeon couldn't help but wonder, "Why did you say you'd revise the contract if we're going to be like this?" It felt almost contradictory. His proximity, the way he spoke to her, everything hinted at something deeper than the professional relationship they were supposed to have. "This is a special occasion," Mujin said when she finally voiced her thoughts. He gave her a wry smile. "You're really uncomfortable, aren't you? Just stand how you want to." Suyeon sighed in defeat. "You win," she thought, though she couldn't help the small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. He had a way of disarming her like no one else. When they finally arrived at the office, Suyeon breathed a sigh of relief. "Good morning, Ms. Cheon," someone greeted her as they walked through the doors. She nodded in response, still catching her breath. That was close, but it was worth all the trouble. As she settled into her desk, her mind was already racing ahead. "I need to finish this contract today. I can't afford to wrinkle Mr. Tae's jacket twice." Asterisk, asterisk. She glanced over at Mujin, who was deep in conversation with someone else. "We need to look as if we're engaged," she thought, chewing on her lip. "You're not nagging him to engage in physical contact, Suyeon." She rolled her eyes at herself, knowing full well that her feelings were anything but professional. What woman hates it when the man she likes touches her? Suyeon's mind wandered again, her thoughts drifting back to Mujin. "The man I like." She glanced at him again, a small smile playing on her lips. "With the man I like, By the end of the day, she had finished drafting the contract. "If I sign today, I'll really become Mr. Tae's official bride," she realized, her heart skipping a beat. But as the reality of her situation settled in, doubt began to creep in. It hasn't sunk in yet. Her eyes drifted toward the door. "Why did I hide?" Suyeon stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. "Why did I hide?" She berated herself silently. "I should have proudly introduced myself as his bride." But the moment had come and gone, and all she could do was replay her hesitation. The subway doors whooshed shut, and the sound seemed to mock her, like the closing of an opportunity she had let slip away. "And you call yourself a bride?" she thought, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Mujin appeared beside her, as calm as ever. "I just came as well," he said, not seeming to notice her inner turmoil. They sat down, and Suyeon's mind buzzed as Mujin handed her the contract. "Is something going on at work?" he asked, as though nothing had changed between them. "Yes," she replied, trying to focus. "IGCO will be doing our commercial, and the marketing team is ecstatic. I did tell them it's confidential for now, but I think rumors will spread soon." "IGCO," Mujin's voice trailed off, and his brow furrowed slightly. Suyeon noticed the subtle shift in his mood, but couldn't quite place why he seemed upset. "You haven't even signed with him yet," Mujin said, and Suyeon could hear the quiet edge in his voice. "Don't worry, we'll make sure to pay him," she assured, but Mujin didn't seem convinced. He handed her the contract to review, but there was an unspoken tension between them. Suyeon skimmed through the document, but her mind wasn't on the words. Why is he upset? She wondered, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. His face was unreadable, but she could feel the frustration beneath his calm exterior. Suddenly, Mujin asked, "What exactly constitutes good physical contact?" The question caught Suyeon off guard. "What?" She blinked, unsure of what he was getting at. "Ambiguity is the worst thing in a contract," he explained coolly. "We need to clearly define it so there are no issues on both sides." Suyeon frowned, her confusion deepening. Why does this matter so much to him? She thought. What difference does it make whether it's ambiguous or clear when it's a contract that can't be fully adhered to? She asked, growing frustrated herself. Mujin's eyes darkened, and he leaned forward slightly. "Are you saying I already breached the contract?" "Yes," she shot back. Why did you? The words escaped her before she could stop them. You're not allowed to meet other women. He raised an eyebrow, his expression one of calm inquiry. What exactly are you saying I did? Nothing, she muttered, feeling foolish. Just read the rest of it. Mujin didn't let it go. Tell me, or I won't sign this today. There was a pause, a tension hanging between them. Suyeon sighed and relented. I signed it. Give me that. She reached for the contract, but Mujin held it firmly in his grasp. I'm not done reviewing it, he said smoothly, his tone making it clear that he wasn't going to let this drop. Physical contact without consent is forbidden according to the contract. Suyeon's frustration boiled over. He's not even taking this seriously. I'm done signing, she said firmly. You just need to sign it now. Mujin looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Signing a contract like this isn't acceptable. Marriage shouldn't be taken so lightly, even if it's conditional. Her heart skipped a beat at his words. You're the one who'll be in a difficult situation if I don't sign this, she replied, trying to maintain her composure. So you're okay with doing it like this? He asked, his voice soft but full of meaning. Once I sign this, there really is no turning back. Don't you think it's better to tell me what the problem is beforehand? Suyeon's mind raced, trying to find the right words. Does he really not see what's bothering me? If, before your wedding, you meet a woman you really want to marry, that's not a breach of contract, she asked hesitantly, her heart sinking as she imagined the scenario. Mujin gave her a confused look. That won't happen. But Suyeon pressed on, her emotions spilling out. Even today, you met a woman. He looked genuinely perplexed. Who are you talking about? I saw you speaking to her in front of the elevator, she blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. Mujin's lips curled into a slight smile. And that bothered you? No, she protested, though her face betrayed her. I'm simply saying if you're not going to abide by the contract, then there's no need for me to either. Mujin's smile faded, and he looked at her seriously. Signing a contract is a sacred thing. You're the one who first, Suyeon started, but Mujin interrupted her. She's Mr. Han's wife. Suyeon froze, her breath catching in her throat. Mr. Han's wife? She echoed, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I made a fool of myself. Mujin leaned back, clearly amused by her reaction. You're talking about the woman you saw today, right? Let me ask Mr. Han if he has a new wife. No, don't, she grabbed his arm instinctively. He raised an eyebrow, looking down at where she was holding him. Is this good physical contact or bad physical contact? Suyeon's heart raced. Bad, right? She murmured, quickly letting go. We both committed a breach of contract today, Mujin said with a smirk. So let's call it even. Suyeon narrowed her eyes. I didn't. You won't let it go, will you? Mujin said with a sigh, his playful tone gone. She glared at him, feeling the weight of his words. He's vicious. He hasn't even signed, and he's already punishing me. He could cut me some slack. Asterisk, asterisk. Bad physical contact for bad physical contact, Mujin said with a casual shrug. Suyeon flushed, her mind swirling with emotions. It wasn't really bad, she thought, her heart betraying her once again. What I mean is, she stammered, unsure how to explain what she was feeling. Mujin cut her off with a teasing grin. This won't do. If you want to upset me, you need to be a lot bolder. Her breath caught in her throat. What is he doing? She tried to steady her voice. So it's bad physical contact when you really get upset? Mujin leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. And what constitutes good physical contact? Suyeon's heart was in her throat as he closed the distance between them. The standard still vague, she thought, her mind spinning. After all, people are quite self-oriented. You and I could feel differently about the same situation, he said, his gaze steady on hers. Then how did you find it just now? Suyeon swallowed hard. For me, it was hot. Suyeon felt a twinge of surprise at the mention of decision to leave. Wait, he watched that? She thought, her mind racing. It was unexpected. Mujin always preferred Hollywood blockbusters, the kind of big, glossy movies that matched his sharp, composed demeanor. But this? A Korean film about intricate emotions and difficult decisions? It made her pause, wondering what else she didn't know about him. What do you want to watch, Mr. Tae? She asked, trying to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. I think a Hollywood film would be nice, he replied with his usual confidence. But Suyeon couldn't help but push a little. No, Korean flicks are better these days. She was teasing, but the truth was she wanted to know why he had chosen such a deep, introspective film. Did it reflect something in him? Mujin seemed unfazed, as if the choice of film wasn't as significant as she made it out to be. All right, he said, then sit down and wait here. I'll go get the tickets. Suyeon blinked, startled. He's going to get the tickets? That felt odd. It's okay, she said quickly, standing up as if to stop him. I'm used to this. But he waved her off, insisting she stay put. It's fine, so just wait here. Watching him walk off, she felt a pang of guilt. I feel bad, like I'm making him do an errand. Her eyes followed him as he moved confidently through the crowd, his presence commanding attention even in the mundane act of buying movie tickets. She overheard whispers from nearby, a group of people noticing him, admiring him. Hey, did you see that guy? He looks like an actor. Look at him. Is he a celebrity? Suyeon felt a small smile creep onto her face. Of course, Mr. Tae would stand out, she thought. He's the kind of man who draws attention without even trying. But as the whispers continued, she couldn't help but wonder, does he ever get tired of it? Will he ever find someone he can just be himself with? Someone he can open his heart to? Asterisk, asterisk. Mujin returned with the tickets in hand, breaking her thoughts. Let's go, Ms. Cheon. Before she could respond, he stopped again. Popcorn, he declared with sudden enthusiasm. We can't not buy popcorn when we're at the movies. Suyeon giggled. Stay here. I'll go get some, she said, rushing off. It felt good to be doing something for him, even if it was just buying snacks. She came back with a large tub of popcorn, smiling brightly. Mr. Tae, look, they gave me extra popcorn. But Mujin didn't seem all that interested. Let's go, he said, his focus already shifting back to the film. Suyeon frowned a little, wondering if she had made the wrong call. Does he not like popcorn? She mused. Next time, I'll get something else. As the movie played, Suyeon's mind wandered. It's not as good as I expected, she admitted to herself, sneaking glances at Mujin. Doesn't Mr. Tae find this boring? She shifted awkwardly in her seat, trying to gauge his mood, but his expression remained unreadable. She fidgeted nervously, whispering, sorry. Focus on the movie. Halfway through, Mujin's phone buzzed. Suyeon glanced over, noticing the call. Mr. Tae, the exit's that way, she said softly, pointing towards the doors. Don't you need to take the call? It must be a work call. It's fine, he replied, sliding his phone back into his pocket. Suyeon hesitated, feeling like she was crossing a line. I think you should, she insisted. It must be important. Mujin turned towards her, his eyes sharp. Don't act like you're my secretary, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Suyeon's heart skipped a beat. He's right, she realized. I'm not his secretary anymore. She watched him for a moment longer, seeing him in a new light. Someone she was still figuring out, someone with layers she hadn't yet uncovered. The movie ended, and Mujin stretched. Let's go get some food, he said casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Food, Suyeon repeated, feeling a bit self-conscious. Should I really take up more of his time? She wondered. Maybe a quick meal would be better. Then how about a quick sandwich? She suggested, trying to sound casual. But Mujin's gaze told her she had missed the mark. Nope, wrong suggestion, she thought immediately, wincing inwardly. Sandwiches aren't suitable for dates, are they? Suddenly, her own words echoed back in her mind. Wait, this was a date? Suyeon's heart skipped a beat. A date? The words echoed in her mind. She hadn't realized it until now, but everything seemed to click. The movie, the subtle tension, the shared moments. This was more than just an outing. She glanced at Mujin, who seemed unfazed, composed as ever, and tried to shake off the growing sense of panic fluttering in her chest. I'm on a date with Mr. Tae? Her thoughts spun. Not that it's weird considering we're getting married soon, but still. Her heart pounded, the weight of the realization settling in. Batum. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her cool. Then Mujin spoke casually. Let's go to a hotel. Hotel? Suyeon stammered, her mind jumping to conclusions. Her eyes widened in shock until he clarified. To get some food. She let out a relieved sigh, mentally scolding herself. Right, food? Why did I think otherwise? Asterisk asterisk, she quickly straightened up, embarrassed by her own reaction. Okay, let's go, she managed, trying to sound as nonchalant as he did. As they walked, their footsteps echoing in the corridor, she couldn't help but feel her nerves kicking again. Mujin suddenly paused. By the way, did you make a reservation? Caught off guard, Suyeon fumbled for her phone. Oh, I'll do it now. She hadn't expected this. Reservations? She thought, cursing her inexperience with these kinds of situations. I'm sure you haven't made many yourself, Mujin added, giving her a pointed look. She straightened. No, I'll do it, she insisted, trying to take control of at least this part of the evening. As they moved towards the hotel, Suyeon noticed Mujin's phone buzzing again. She looked at him, concerned. Mr. Tae, you can go if it's something urgent. No, that won't be necessary, he responded with an almost dismissive tone, leaving her wondering what was going through his mind. Was this really a date? She questioned herself again, feeling the weight of their silent steps. He sighed softly. The next day will be better. Suyeon blinked, surprised by his words. Yes, she agreed a little too quickly. We can always have more dates. The following morning, the peaceful air around their date was shattered when the news broke. Suyeon couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the headlines. Taesung Life Insurance embroiled in scandal. Her heart sank, and immediately she thought of Mujin. Is this why the date ended so abruptly yesterday? In a tense boardroom at Taesung, the atmosphere was thick with frustration and anger. Mujin stood at the center of the storm, facing harsh accusations from Tae Muyal, a man driven to desperation. The room buzzed with tension as Muyal burst through the door. Mujin Tae, it was you, wasn't it? Muyal's voice was filled with venom as he lunged forward, rage consuming him. How dare you go after my father? I'll kill you. Before Mujin could respond, the security staff intervened, pulling Muyal away. But the damage was already done. The boardroom had turned into a battlefield, with harsh words flying around like daggers. As Mujin watched, calm but calculating, the accusations continued. Was this necessary? He thought. But if we hadn't exposed the corruption, Taesung Life Insurance would have collapsed. This had to be done, for the company's sake, for the future. Asterisk asterisk. Muyal was dragged out, but his words echoed in the room. You plummeted the stocks just to get rid of one person? Mujin stood firm, his face unreadable. The stocks will recover with the right leadership, he said calmly, already envisioning the future. But the current president won't step down easily. It's my responsibility to ensure that he does. The door creaked shut, leaving Mujin alone with his thoughts. His father's shadow loomed over everything, and now he had to live with the consequences of decisions made long ago. That evening, Suyeon found herself thinking of Mujin again. She wondered if he was all right, considering everything that had unfolded that morning. The rumors were spreading quickly, and she overheard her colleague, Ms. Lee, talking about the incident. President Tae got attacked today, Ms. Lee said, shaking her head. What? Suyeon gasped, her heart lurching at the news. Ms. Lee continued. It was Tae Muyal causing a scene. We were all shocked. It was like Mujin took the hit on purpose. Maybe he wanted to provoke him into doing something reckless. Suyeon felt a pang of worry. Is he okay? She wondered, her mind racing. She decided she had to check on him. I need to see him. Later that evening, she knocked on Mujin's office door. Mr. Tae, it's Suyeon, she called softly, stepping inside. What she found startled her. Mujin was fast asleep at his desk, his face resting against the cold surface. Quietly, she set down her things and carefully approached him. He hasn't even applied ointment, she realized, seeing the slight bruise from earlier. She moved gently, applying the ointment while he slept, her fingers light on his skin. She looked at the cold coffee on the desk. He's not going to drink it, is he? She thought sadly. As she finished, Mujin stirred, his eyes blinking open in confusion. He stared at her, groggy, as if unsure if she was real. Then, in a low, tired voice, he murmured, "Don't go." Before she could respond, he pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close. Suyeon's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding wildly as she felt his warmth against her. What does this mean? She wondered, lost in the moment, her emotions swirling. For now, she stayed, just as he'd asked. Mujin thought. It was a dream. It doesn't make that Suyeon's. Here. She left the company long ago. It's the scent. I remembered. So gentle. A bit more. Flinch. Suyeon? WHWH. What just happened? Mr. Tae put his face to my neck. What are you doing? Here, Suyeon? Actually, let me apologize for what just happened. It's my mistake. Mr. Tae put his face to my neck. And why are you apologizing? Because it's a breach of our contract. That darn contract. Sigh. I'll let it slide since you got attacked today. Attacked? I don't want that. So you want me to make it an issue? How could being attack you absolve me of my responsibility? Oh, you and your peasonality. Coffee. I prepared it. You used to like the coffee I made for you. Should I get you a new one? That's warm? No, this is fine. Thank you. Is it okay to tell Manager Lee that I'm the bride at your wedding? Do as you wish. Okay. Doesn't he care when it's his wedding? Lung A30. Well, I'm finished with what I wanted to say, so it'll be off. Bow. I may end up breaching the contract again from now on. But you signed the holy contract. I may. Apart from your face, you didn't get punched Elson here, did you? Do I seem strange to you? No. But you just seem different than normal. And what am I like normally? You never cross the line. Rattle. But that was when you and near my secretary. No, I wish you didn't consider me solely as your EX boss. Ill. Be heading out. Click. Something about him's. Or am I mistaken? How the Ms. Lee. It went well. And it'll be the bride at the wedding. Oh my gosh. Really? That's great, eh? That's. I'll call you if I need to in regards to the wedding. All right. Silence. Plus wish you didn't consider me solely asterisk as your EX boss. Nah 70. Why did you say that? If not an EX boss, then what? My marriage partner? Blush. Bam am. No, no, no. Calm down. Suyeon, if you're wrong, you'll be greatly disappointed. I can't imagine Mr. Tae being so attached to a woman, and even more so if that woman is me. Get a grip. We've arrived. Here. Thank you. I'm home. Suyeon, did you have? You don't need to prepare anything. Oh, you have a mosquito bite. Sorry? On your neck. Is that why? Ms. Lee? It's CKY. Can you imagine jettino? A mosquito bite. In this weather? Ananana. Sohivu. Scrano. SCROUGH. Seriton. I've got some work to do, so I'm gonna head up. All right? Don't work too late. Why are you causing trouble for me? Oh, Mestre Cheon. We got a reply for the commercial. IJECO's side says he'll sign only if he meets you in person. Me? Yes, that's all they wrote, so I don't. Can't CW the Ria Sony. But why? I'm offering him the price he asked. So why does he remember bumping into me at the broadcasting station? Wife, 16A, 20. One doubted. Celebrities meet tons of people and we just met momentarily, so frankly it's not a problem to meet him. Both parties are prohibited from meeting the opposite sex. But the clause in the contract does worry him a bit. Best to be sure. Just in case. Tap, tap, tap. TF. I have a meeting with IJSEO before signing the contract. It's work, so it isn't a breach, right? Asterisk. Send. Hello? Resolute. You can't. Not 30. His agent is saying ELL sign only if he meets the president. We need to make sure he's happy, so tell him to stop with the flirting and just sign F flirting. This is a Ruzinesi meeting, not a blind date. I don't think flirting is really an Ankopki eyes word. So you're saying you'll meet him? Suyeon felt her pulse quicken as she stood before Mujin Tae. The situation had become more complex than she'd imagined, and her own emotions were starting to weigh heavily on her. If you don't want me to, then I won't, she had stammered earlier, unsure of what he expected from her. Mujin's response was calm, as always. Really? Then please proceed accordingly. It was the kind of thing that left Suyeon wondering if he ever truly let his guard down. Understood, Mr. Tae, she had replied, her voice steady despite the swirl of thoughts in her mind. Back to work then, she reminded herself, though the task seemed trivial compared to the whirlwind of feelings she was wrestling with. After the call ended, she sighed, reflecting on her own reality. I guess I have no choice even if the contract falls through. Because of this, she thought. Mujin's support had been vital, and without it, she would have never come this far. But behind her gratitude, a question gnawed at her. Is there some kind of grudge between them? Her mind wandered, her heart hoping it wasn't something as cliched as two men fighting over the same woman. Please, not that. Later, she learned that Mujin was in China, and it stung more than she expected. He's in China? Why didn't he tell me? Suyeon's thoughts immediately filled with disappointment. She wasn't his secretary anymore, but wasn't she more than that now? No, I'm not, she reminded herself bitterly. I'm no longer his secretary, just the woman he's bound to marry for convenience. Her colleague Ms. Lee had tried to cheer her up. You went from a secretary to a CEO. That's one hell of a promotion, she had said, but Suyeon couldn't share her enthusiasm. And now I have that much more work, Suyeon thought, though her real burden was emotional, not professional. As the topic turned to the wedding preparations, Suyeon felt even more detached. I didn't want to invite anyone, she mused after their conversation. How could I brag about my wedding when it's not even real? She sighed, her mind clouded with thoughts of the future. Once the wedding's over, he'll treat me like a stranger. Her hand clenched at the thought. I wish I could just skip the wedding and be Mr. Tae's bride for the rest of my life. ****. Meanwhile, Mujin found himself in China, walking through a high-end store, looking for the perfect gift. It wasn't something he was used to doing, but for some reason, this time felt different. Gifts, he thought. Yes, I need to get my wife and daughter something since I'm on a business trip. What better time to be a good husband? He joked with a colleague, but found himself genuinely considering what a thoughtful gift might be. Do they like sudden gifts? He wondered, almost nervously. Would they feel burdened by it? His colleague chuckled. Of course they'd like it. What kind of wife doesn't like a gift from her husband? The word husband lingered in his mind. Husband. Could he really be the kind of husband Suyeon deserved? He brushed the thought aside for now, focusing on the task at hand. I'll see her after the break, he thought, already planning his return. As he walked through the store, his mind flickered to Suyeon. I've never bought a woman's gift before, except maybe a building, he smiled at the thought. Then it hit him, Suyeon ran a handbag company. A handbag? That would make sense. Learning about handbags from other countries could help her broaden her perspective. His business mind kicked in. That's a good gift. He entered the store with purpose. I'd like to buy a lady's handbag. The store clerk, who spoke in Chinese, asked, Is it for your girlfriend? Mujin hesitated for a moment. Girlfriend? No, she's more my wife than my girlfriend. Please give me the best-selling one, he requested, keeping his emotions in check. The clerk smiled. What's her style like? Mujin thought about Suyeon, her sincerity, her warmth even in tough situations, and that smile of hers, the one that always seemed to light up her face no matter what. She's sincere in all matters, he began, almost surprising himself with how much he noticed about her. She tries to maintain a positive energy, even in difficult situations, and she has a beautiful smile. The clerk nodded. I'm sure she'll appreciate it even more if you choose something that suits her style. Mujin felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. I can't tell her I chose a bag thinking of her that way, he thought, his heart betraying him. But he went through with it. making the purchase with Suyeon in mind. Later, when Suyeon bumped into Mujin unexpectedly, she was caught off guard. "Mr. Tae? I thought you were at the hotel," she said, her voice filled with surprise. "He was out buying gifts, women's gifts." "I needed to get a gift as well," he replied calmly, brushing off her offer to help. "I wanted to choose it myself." Suyeon watched as he carried bags filled with shoes, clothes, and desserts. "Why is he buying so many women's items?" she wondered, her stomach nodding. "What's your wife's shoe size?" Mujin asked casually, and Suyeon's heart sank further. Why does he keep asking about his wife's sizes? She thought, unsure of why it bothered her so much. That night, she couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. Is it because of the gifts? She asked herself. No, I'm just curious. I was surprised to hear he bought gifts for a woman. Asterisk, asterisk, she clenched her fists, trying to steady her emotions. There's no other woman, she reminded herself. But deep down, she knew her heart was caught somewhere between hope and reality. Nor do I need one, she echoed Mujin's words. But what about me? Her balance, her emotions, tipped precariously. Clench, she told herself, struggling to hold on.